Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights and let the dread begin. One, you may only enter after midnight and must leave by 4 a.m. No exceptions. 2, check out a book before 12:30 a.m., even if you don't plan to read it. The library must know you're a guest. 3, if you hear whispers from the aisles, do not try to find the source. Keep your head down and keep reading. 4, the woman in the white dress sometimes appears on the second floor. Do not let her see you. 5, if the lights flicker more than 3 times, close your book and leave immediately. 6, at exactly 2:45 a.m., the library will go silent. Do not move until the sounds return. 7, if you hear your name whispered but no one is around, leave your book and exit the building. Do not look back. Creepy, right? But I wasn't stupid. I took the rules seriously. And looking back, that was probably the only reason I made it through the night. I arrived at the library at exactly 11:55 p.m. The air outside was crisp, but as I stepped through the heavy wooden doors, an eerie warmth wrapped around me, like the building had been waiting for us. My backpack was packed with everything I thought I'd need: notes, a few pens, a bottle of water, some snacks, and just in case, a flashlight. The library was almost empty. Only a handful of students were scattered around, looking just as wary as I felt. Ms. Dawson, the librarian, sat behind the front desk, her sharp eyes flicking up briefly as I walked in. She was a woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair pulled into a tight bun, and a face that seemed permanently etched into a frown. She didn't speak as I signed in, just nodded slightly before returning to whatever she was reading. At exactly 12:10 a.m., I made my way to the front desk and checked out a book. It was a horror anthology, a collection of unsettling short stories. It felt appropriate for the night, and maybe in some twisted way comforting. Ms. Dawson took the book from me, stamped it without a word, and slid it back across the desk. By 12:30 a.m., I had settled into a corner on the first floor, away from the main study area, but close enough to a reading lamp that I didn't have to rely on the library's dim overhead lights. The place was silent, aside from the occasional shuffle of pages and the soft scratch of pens against notebooks. For the first hour, everything felt normal, almost disappointingly so. I read a few pages, took notes, and even found myself getting lost in the book's eerie tales. The atmosphere was heavy, sure, but nothing happened. The library was just a library. But then at 1:15 a.m., the whispers started. At first, I thought I had imagined it, a soft, barely audible murmur drifting between the shelves. A trick of my tired brain. But then I heard it again, closer this time. A voice. Low. Faint. Like someone was standing just beyond the rows of books, whispering into the darkness. I kept my head down. I kept reading, because I had followed the rules. And I wasn't about to stop now. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the wind slipping through the old wooden shelves, winding through the narrow aisles like a breath of air in an ancient tomb. But then it hit me. There was no wind inside the library. The windows were shut tight, and the massive doors hadn't opened since I walked in. The voices weren't coming from the building. They were coming from the darkness, soft at first. A barely audible murmur, threading its way between the bookshelves like a secret being whispered just beyond my reach. I gripped my book tighter, my fingers digging into the worn pages. Rule number 3. If you hear whispers from the aisles, do not try to find the source. Keep your head down and keep reading. So I did. I forced myself to focus on the words in front of me, even though they blurred together into an unreadable mess. My breathing felt too loud. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out the whispers, but only for a moment, because they were getting louder. What had started as a distant, unintelligible murmur now sounded like a full-blown conversation, just out of reach, just beyond the shelves. The voices twisted and wove together, overlapping in hushed tones, urgent and insistent. And then, a pause, a moment of suffocating silence before I heard my name. Not from the whispers, from upstairs. My stomach clenched so hard it felt like ice had formed in my gut. Rule number 7. If you hear your name whispered but no one is around, leave your book and exit the building. Do not look back. Every muscle in my body locked up. The air felt thick, suffocating, as if the very walls of the library were holding their breath. My hands trembled as I carefully set my book down on the table, my movements slow, deliberate. I wasn't about to be the idiot in a horror movie who ignored the warning signs. I had followed the rules. I had done everything right. And now, I was getting the hell out. With measured steps, I grabbed my bag and turned toward the exit. And that's when I saw her. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, half shrouded in the darkness of the second floor. The woman in the white dress. Her gown was old-fashioned, the kind you'd see in century-old photographs, the fabric delicate and draping around her like she had just stepped out of another time. Her long, black hair spilled over her face, a curtain hiding whatever lay beneath. She didn't move. She didn't breathe. And she was blocking the only way out. My throat went dry. Rule number 4. The woman in the white dress sometimes appears on the second floor. Do not let her see you. I willed myself to stay completely still, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. Maybe she hadn't noticed me yet. Maybe if I backed up slowly, I could slip into the shadows before she sees me. Before even I complete my thought, her head snapped up, a sharp, jerking motion, unnatural and wrong, as if some invisible force had yanked her gaze toward me. I saw her face for a split second before instinct took over, and I ran. Her eyes were empty, black voids where they should have been. And her mouth was too wide, stretched into an unnatural grin, like her skin had been pulled and torn to make room for something that shouldn't exist. And she saw me. I didn't stop running until I was back at my seat. My legs felt weak, my lungs burning from the sudden sprint, but I didn't care. I dropped into my chair, my hands gripping the edge of the table, so tightly my knuckles turned white. I pulled my hoodie up, sinking into its fabric like it could somehow shield me from whatever had just happened. My breathing was ragged, uneven, but I forced myself to stay quiet. If I made a sound, if I moved too much, would she come back? I had followed the rules, and something still saw me. A cold, creeping dread settled in my chest, heavier than before. I clenched my jaw, trying to focus on the only thing grounding me, the slow, steady ticking of the clock on the library wall. Every second that passed felt stretched, dragging on too long, as if time itself was hesitating, unsure whether to move forward. The minutes ticked by. Then, at exactly 2:45 a.m., everything changed. The library went silent. Not normal silence. Not the quiet of an empty room or the hush of a late-night study session. This was wrong. It was like the entire building had been swallowed whole by a vacuum. The low hum of the overhead lights vanished. The faint creaks of the wooden shelves, the subtle rustling of paper, gone. Even the ticking of the clock, the one thing keeping me grounded, had stopped. I held my breath. Even my own breathing felt muted, like the silence was pressing down on my lungs, smothering every sound before it could escape. I remembered rule number 6. At exactly 2:45 a.m., the library will go silent. Do not move until the sounds return. So I sat there perfectly still. Seconds dragged into minutes. Or maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It was impossible to tell how much time had passed. The stillness felt endless, stretching out in every direction, wrapping around me like something alive. Then, a sound. Not a whisper. Not a footstep. Something dragging across the floor. Slow. Deliberate. A dull, scraping noise, like something heavy being pulled along the ground. My body went rigid. The sound wasn't random. It wasn't distant. It was coming from the second floor. Do not move. Do not move. Do not move. The words repeated in my head like a desperate prayer. The dragging sound continued, unhurried, methodical. It grew closer, creeping down the unseen aisles above me. And then, the staircase. The slow, scraping movement shifted, becoming heavier, louder. It was descending. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, the sharp pain barely registering through the sheer terror flooding my body. My pulse pounded in my ears, but I didn't move. It reached the first floor. The dragging sound was behind me now. So close. I squeezed my eyes shut, every muscle in my body screaming for me to run, to bolt for the door and never look back. But I couldn't. I knew I couldn't. The sound stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. Just the crushing, suffocating silence pressing down on me. Then, a voice, right against my ear. I see you. Cold breath brushed against my skin, sending a violent shiver down my spine. My mind barely had time to process the words before. The sound returned. The ticking clock, the rustling pages, the distant hum of the lights. The sounds returned all at once, like the world had suddenly remembered it was supposed to exist. The crushing silence was gone, replaced by the familiar noises of the library, subtle, ordinary human. I gasped, sucking in air like I had been drowning. My whole body trembled, my hands slick with sweat, my pulse hammering so hard it hurt. I could still feel the whisper against my ear, the ghost of that voice lingering in my mind like a brand burned into my memory. I had followed the rules. I had done everything right. And yet, something still saw me. I wasn't going to wait around to see what happened next. Screw 4 a.m. Screw the scholarship. Screw everything. I grabbed my bag with shaking hands, my fingers fumbling over the straps. My chair scraped against the floor as I stood, too fast, too loud, but I didn't care. I left the book behind. No time to return it, no time to think. I just ran. Through the rows of books, past the grand staircase, keeping my eyes forward, never glancing back. I half expected to hear footsteps following me, to feel a cold hand snatch at my wrist before I reached the door, but nothing happened. I burst into the night air, my heart still racing, my breath coming in ragged, uneven gulps. The sky was black, the campus eerily still, as if the world outside had no idea what I had just been through. But I knew, and I wasn't coming back. Or at least, that's what I told myself. The next evening, I found myself standing at the library doors again. I hadn't planned to return. Every rational part of my brain told me to stay far away. But something pulled me back, curiosity, fear, or maybe just the need to understand what had happened. Ms. Dawson was at the front desk, as always. She didn't ask why I had left early. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just looked at me, her sharp eyes scanning my face like she was searching for something. Some sign, some confirmation that I knew now. "You followed the rules," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A fact. I swallowed hard and nodded. She sighed, almost like she had expected me to fail. Then, without another word, she slid a fresh copy of the rule sheet across the counter. "Good," she murmured, her voice quieter this time. "But next time." She tapped a finger on the paper, her gaze meeting mine. "Sit somewhere closer to the exit." It started the way it always does. I'm staring at the ceiling, the darkness of my bedroom pressing down, heavy and suffocating. My mind feels like a record stuck on a single groove, thoughts repeating and folding in on themselves. I tell myself it's fine. Sleep will come. It always does, eventually. The clock ticks louder than it should, every mechanical shift of its hands a sharp intrusion. I don't have to look at it to know it's late, but I do anyway. 2:13 a.m. I roll over, dragging the covers with me, and squeeze my eyes shut. My body feels exhausted, but my brain won't shut up. What did I forget today? Did I leave the stove on? No, I didn't even cook tonight. But what if I did? I almost throw off the blanket to check, but stop myself. No, this is just my mind playing tricks again. My room feels wrong. The silence isn't comforting. It's alive, too still in a way that doesn't belong. I try to ignore it, focus on the rhythm of my breathing, but it only makes the quiet worse. It's like the air itself is watching, waiting. I roll onto my other side, my back to the door. My eyes sting, desperate for rest, but no matter how I position myself, my body doesn't settle. The mattress feels lumpy, too soft, too firm, somehow both at once. My pillow smells faintly of detergent, the clean scent irritating rather than soothing. I fluff it out, punch it into a shape that might cradle my head, but it doesn't matter. I still feel like I'm lying on a stranger's bed. The clock ticks again. 2:19. 6 minutes have passed, though it felt longer. Or shorter. Time doesn't feel real right now. I turn back over to face the door. My bedroom looks the same as always, shadows stretching long and deep, but there's an unfamiliar edge to it tonight. It feels like I shouldn't be here, like I'm trespassing in my own home. My throat tightens as I scan the room. Nothing's out of place. My dresser is where it should be, the clothes I abandoned earlier still draped across the chair. My phone sits on the nightstand, its screen dark. I almost reach for it. Maybe I can scroll myself to sleep, drown out the restless noise in my brain. But I don't. Something about the thought of turning on the screen feels wrong. I flip onto my stomach, burying my face in the pillow. The darkness behind my eyelids is more oppressive than the one in the room. It feels thick, as though something is pressing down on me, making it impossible to breathe properly. I turn my head to the side, gasping in the cool air, and freeze. Something creaks. It's soft, barely noticeable, but I hear it. My heart pounds against my ribs as I strain to listen. The sound doesn't come again, but my skin prickles as if the air around me has shifted. I glance toward the door again. It's shut, as always. The house is silent. I tell myself it was nothing, just the old wood settling, the way it sometimes does when the temperature drops. But it doesn't help. I roll onto my back again, staring at the ceiling. The ticking clock seems louder now, almost echoing. My chest feels tight, my limbs heavy. I try counting my breaths. In, hold, out. I make it to 20 before the rhythm falls apart, my mind wandering to something else. I hate this feeling, being trapped inside my own body, my own mind, like I can't escape myself. Sleep should be easy. Just close your eyes and let go. Why can't I let go? The air feels colder suddenly. My blanket isn't enough. I pull it tighter around me, but the chill settles into my skin, deep and aching. I glance toward the window. The curtains are drawn, but the faintest sliver of moonlight seeps through the crack where they don't quite meet. It paints a pale streak on the carpet, faint and harmless. But my eyes linger there, drawn to it. There's something unsettling about it, though I can't explain why. It's just moonlight. I shift again, turning onto my other side, and close my eyes once more. My breathing is shallow now, every exhale catching slightly in my throat. I can feel my heart, steady but too loud, like it's trying to compete with the ticking of the clock. I try to focus on it instead. Count the beats. Let it drown everything else out. But I can't. There's another sound. Not the creak this time. Softer. A faint whisper, so low I can barely hear it. My eyes snap open, my heart slamming in my chest. It's gone as quickly as it came. I tell myself I imagined it, but my body doesn't believe me. My muscles are tense, my skin tight with goosebumps. I lie there, frozen, listening for it again. The silence is too thick, too alive. I reach out for the lamp on my nightstand, my fingers trembling. The light will help. It always does. But just as my hand brushes the switch, I stop. Something in me, some primal, animal part, screams not to do it. Don't turn it on. Don't make it worse. My hand falls back to the bed. The whisper comes again, clearer this time. My stomach twists. It doesn't sound like words, not exactly. Just sound. Air moving in a way it shouldn't. It's coming from the far corner of the room, where the shadows are deepest. I can't see anything, but I can feel it. Something is there. Watching. Waiting. I tell myself it's nothing. My mind is playing tricks on me. Sleep deprivation does that. Makes you see and hear things that aren't real. I shut my eyes tight, willing myself to believe it. But the sound doesn't stop. It's growing louder now, closer. My throat is dry. I want to call out, to yell, scream, anything. But I can't. My voice is caught somewhere deep inside me, buried under layers of fear. I press myself deeper into the mattress, clutching the blanket like it's a shield. The whispering shifts, circling the room. I don't want to look. I don't want to know. But I can't stop myself. Slowly, I turn my head toward the corner. My eyes adjust to the darkness, picking out the familiar shapes of my room. The chair, the dresser, the faint outline of the door. Nothing is there. Nothing is ever there. But I can't shake the feeling that if I look long enough, I'll see it. Something I don't want to see. The whispering stops. My ears ring in the sudden silence. My heart races, each beat loud and painful. I force myself to breathe, slow and deep. The air tastes strange now, metallic and sharp. I tell myself it's fine. It's over. But I know better. A weight settles on the edge of the bed. My body stiffens, every nerve screaming at me to run, but I can't move. I can feel it there, pressing down on the mattress, pulling the blanket tighter around me. My breath catches in my throat. I don't want to look. I don't want to see. The weight shifts, moving closer. The blanket slides, just barely, but enough. I clutch it tighter, my knuckles white. My chest feels like it's caving in, my lungs refusing to work. The air around me feels wrong, heavy and thick, like I'm drowning. And then I hear it. A breath. Soft and slow, right next to my ear. My entire body locks up, every muscle frozen in place. I can't think, can't move, can't breathe. The sound lingers, warm and wet against my skin. I squeeze my eyes shut, praying for it to stop, for the sun to rise, for anything to save me from this. But the darkness doesn't lift. The breath doesn't fade. It stays there, steady and unrelenting, as the clock ticks louder and louder, marking every second that passes. And I know in that moment that I'll never fall asleep again. The Nevada heat rippled off the asphalt, distorting the long, empty road ahead. I wiped sweat from my brow and adjusted the camera strap around my neck, squinting at the horizon. No sign of the fox. No sign of anything, really. I should have been writing a real story, something that actually mattered. But instead, I was here, in the middle of nowhere, chasing a local legend about a rare albino desert kit fox that probably didn't even exist. This is what my career had come to. I can imagine the lackluster headline already. Kinley, local journalist, takes photo of a white fox. How exhilarating. I'm a small-town journalist. I'm barely scraping by. A handful of articles on local events, a few dry interviews with our mayor, and nothing that anyone outside my town would ever care about. There was no money in it, no future. If I had the funds, I'd have taken the risk and moved to the city by now, where stories actually happened. But I wasn't just stuck here, I was needed here. My mother had been slipping away for the last 7 years, and I was the only one left to take care of her. My only sibling, my half-brother, was gone, buried under 6 feet of dirt after he took his own life in 2019. He never recovered after his 5-year-old son Jackson died from some rare blood disorder. He tried all sorts of strange treatment options. Never divulged the details, but I know he tried every method possible. The doctors called it an anomaly. Just one of those things. I called it a goddamn nightmare. Rent was due next week. My savings were a joke. If I didn't land something soon anything, I was screwed. A viral photo of the elusive white fox wouldn't change my life, but it might buy me a little more time. Then I saw her, a lone figure in the distance, walking straight down the middle of the road. No car, no supplies, nothing but a slow, dragging gait and the sweltering heat pressing down on her shoulders. I frowned. The nearest town was 30 miles away. She shouldn't have been here. As she neared, I got my first clear look at her, a woman in her 70s, maybe older. Her clothes were stained with dust and sweat, her arms thin and sinewy, her skin burnt and peeling like old parchment. Her hair clung to her forehead, dark with sweat, and something about her felt wrong. My eyes landed on a faded panda tattoo on her arm. It was amateur work, the lines shaky, uneven. I grabbed my canteen and jogged toward her, holding it out. "Hey, take this. You need water." She didn't even flinch. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She stared past me, through me, like I wasn't even there. "Ma'am." No reaction. Her breathing was off, a rattling, phlegmy sound that made my stomach tighten. I reached out carefully, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Hey, seriously, let me take you to a hospital. Or at least, let me get you back home." That's when she stopped. Not gradually, not naturally, just stopped, like a malfunctioning doll that had suddenly lost power. The silence between us stretched. Her chest rose and fell with labored breaths, her skin slick with sweat and dust. Then slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my stomach drop. They weren't just tired. They were vacant, stretched wide in confusion and fear, like she was just realizing she was here. And then she whispered it. "The kids." A chill scraped down my spine. "There are no kids." The words barely made it past her lips, as if she was afraid to say them. "Where are they?" Her voice trembled. Her breathing hitched. Her gaze flickered wildly, as if she were scanning the desert for something, as if she expected to see them. I swallowed hard. "What kids?" "I don't." Her body jerked forward, as if something snapped inside her. She grabbed my wrist, her fingers like claws digging into my skin. "Where's my baby?" She was gasping now, panic gripping her entire body. Her legs shook beneath her, and suddenly she was fighting for air, like a fish thrown onto the shore. "The kids. They're gone. All of them." Her voice splintered into raw hysteria. Her body convulsed, chest rising and falling too fast, her fingers tightening until my skin burned. "Ashbrook." She wheezed out, eyes wild and unfocused. "There are no kids in Ashbrook. All of them gone." Then she collapsed. I barely caught her before she hit the ground. She was still breathing, but it was shallow-labored, like something inside her was breaking. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I knew one thing. I had to get her help. I dragged her toward the jeep, my heart slamming against my ribs. Ashbrook! A town I'd never stepped foot in. A town 30 miles further down this empty road. I raced for what felt like hours, but really was only 20-odd minutes. A rundown sign finally catches my attention. "Welcome to Ashbrook." It didn't take long to find what looked to be a hospital. I whipped the jeep into the parking lot, slammed it in park, and bolted for the front door. "Hello! Someone help, please." A man in a white coat ran past me and out the front door without even acknowledging my presence. I followed the dark-haired doctor as he rushed outside, pushing a wheelchair toward my jeep. The elderly woman was slumped in the seat, her breaths short and shallow. I expected him to ask me questions, where I found her, what happened, but he didn't. His face was unreadable. You know her? I asked. The doctor didn't look up. We all know Marley. His voice was stiff, like he wasn't supposed to say more. Inside, the hospital felt off. It wasn't the usual sterile, overlit nightmare of hospitals. The walls were a sickly beige, the waiting room nearly silent. A single nurse sat behind the counter, barely acknowledging me. The place was almost empty. No kids, no families, just a handful of elderly patients, staring at the walls like they were waiting for something. I sat in the lobby for an hour before a nurse approached me. Her smile felt forced. "She'll be fine," she said. "You can leave now." Something about it didn't sit right. "Can I see her?" The nurse hesitated, then shook her head. "She's resting." Liar. I don't know what it is, but the delivery from the nurse gave it all away. I stepped outside, the heat slamming into me like a wall. I needed air. I needed space. But most of all, I needed to get the hell out of that hospital. Something about the place, about the way they treated Marley like an afterthought, the way the nurse brushed me off, felt wrong. I leaned against the Jeep, rubbing my temples. I could just leave, drive home, pretend none of this happened. But the words wouldn't leave me. There are no kids in Ashbrook. Marley wasn't just confused. She was afraid. And now that I was here, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't wrong. I scanned the street in front of me. Ashbrook was small, unsettlingly quiet. A handful of businesses lined the street. Nothing modern, nothing corporate. Just mom-and-pop shops that looked like they hadn't been updated in decades. A thrift store, a butcher shop, a place called Ashbrook Treasures with sun-faded knickknacks in the window. It wasn't what I expected. For a town with no children, no young families, Ashbrook was alive. People milled about, moving between stores, chatting outside the diner. It was as if the town was perfectly content in its own isolated world. I grabbed my camera and notebook from the passenger seat. If there were no kids here, someone had to notice. Someone had to care. I decided to start small. The first shop I saw was an arts and crafts store, run down but still open. Maybe I could ease into it, chat up the owner, get a feel for the people here before pushing too hard. I pulled open the door, the small brass bell jingling overhead. The smell of dried wood, old paper, and something vaguely floral filled the air. Shelves of handmade trinkets lined the walls, woven baskets, carved figurines, hand-painted signs with phrases like "Bless this home" and "Welcome friends." No sign of a cashier. I hesitated, glancing around. "Hello, are you open?" A few seconds passed before a woman emerged from a supply closet in the back, sporting a tie-dye shirt and pink shorts. She smiled easily, her movements quick and eager, like someone who wasn't used to getting many customers. "Well, howdy there. Not very often we get an outsider. Look around, everything is negotiable. Let me know if you need any help at all." Her energy was a stark contrast to the cold, distant reception I got at the hospital. I returned her smile, slipping into journalist mode. If I wanted answers, I needed to blend in. Be friendly. Be honest. Be curious, but not suspicious. I ran my fingers over a small, hand-carved wooden owl sitting on the counter. "Actually, I'm a journalist. I wanted to talk to some locals to see if they had any interesting stories to share about life in Ashbrook." The woman's eyes flickered upward, as if considering something. "Well, there's not much that goes on in this town," she said finally. "Sometimes we get some drunkards who make fools of themselves for our entertainment. But that's about as exciting as it gets around here." I let out a short laugh. She was lying. I could feel it. I decided to shift gears. "You know, I came to town because an elderly woman collapsed in front of me about 30 miles out from Ashbrook. I hope she's okay. Do you happen to know her?" She was about my height, a bit thinner, had a panda tattoo on her arm. The shift in her expression was immediate. A flicker of something, concern, fear, recognition, crossed her face before she covered it with a quick, practiced smile. "Marley? Oh dear Lord, that poor woman." The shopkeeper wrung her hands together, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "She's been having a rough go of it lately." Something about the way she said it made my stomach knot. "What do you mean?" I asked. She hesitated, glancing at the front door like she was checking for someone. "She's just not well." The same vague response I got at the hospital. She said something strange before she passed out. I pressed. Kept talking about kids. Said there were no kids in Ashbrook. The shopkeeper's smile faltered. It was quick, just a flicker, but I caught it. The tightening of her lips. The way her fingers twitched against the counter. "She's confused," she said too quickly. "Been saying strange things for a while now." I pretended to scribble something in my notebook. "So what exactly happened to those kids again? Why'd they leave? I forget. I was bluffing. I had absolutely no information other than what some crazy, exhausted lady said before she'd passed out. Her hands stilled against the countertop. They never left. Just gotta pass their trials. The words left her lips softly, like a reflex, something she'd said 1,000 times before. My stomach twisted. What trials? The shopkeeper's eyes snapped up, like she just realized what she said. She forced another smile, too wide, too strained. Oh, just an old saying. Anyway, like I said, pick anything you like. 40% discount for the outsider. She turned and grabbed something from a nearby shelf, a handmade doll. It was disturbingly realistic. The fingers too small, the glass eyes too bright. A gift, the shopkeeper had said. It didn't feel like one. My son made this one a long time ago, but I'd like you to have it. I turned it from side to side, bouncing its limbs as if I was appreciating the craftsmanship. There was a bit of some kind of dark sludge seeping through the collar of the doll's small shirt. Someone must have been playing with it outside recently. It sure smelled like it. I crinkled my nose and pulled back slightly to avoid the odor. I wiped the grime off the doll with my shirt sleeve and shoved it into my bag, pushing away the unease curling in my stomach. As I was zipping it back up, I heard something that caught my attention. Across the street, a group of 3 men stood outside a small, government-looking building, something between a courthouse and a town hall. They spoke in low, hushed voices, heads close together. Their conversation was clipped, urgent. I waved goodbye to the shopkeeper, hurriedly leaving to get a closer listen to the 3 men. I slowed my pace, pretending to check my camera settings as I passed by. We'll take him down tonight. You sure they're ready? Council already approved it. We go down after dark. A sharp silence followed. I looked up. They were staring at me. All 3 of them, still, silent, their expressions blank. My pulse kicked up. I forced a casual smile, tapping my camera. Cool old building, I said, gesturing toward the town hall. History buffs love this stuff. They didn't respond, just kept watching. The moment stretched too long, like they were waiting to see if I'd keep talking. I cleared my throat and turned, walking away. But I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I needed a break. Just for a moment. Something to ground me. It had been a mentally exhausting day. The neon glow of a diner sign flickered ahead. Ashbrook Diner. Simple, welcoming. Inside, it was like stepping into a time capsule. Checkered floors, red leather booths, the faint sound of an old radio crackling in the corner. A handful of locals sat at the counter, their conversations quiet. A waitress, middle-aged, kind smile, approached me. Haven't seen you before, sweetheart. What can I get you? I wasn't in the mood for anything extravagant. Just a burger and fries. Medium well. She hesitated for a second. Just a second. Then she smiled again, coming right up. It arrived quickly. I was impressed. It's like they had it ready to go before I'd even walked in. The smell was intoxicating, rich, perfectly seasoned, almost unreal. I took a bite. It was absolutely delicious. Better than any burger I'd ever had. The juices melted in my mouth, the meat soft and tender. I devoured half of it before I even realized swallowed the first bite. I finished my meal, thanked the waitress, and left. I felt full, satisfied. Almost comforted. That feeling wouldn't last. Hours passed. It was now nighttime. A full moon, not a cloud in the sky. It was beautiful. I wanted to take it all in and enjoy it, but I had work to do. The veil of night was draping the town in a heavy silence. The full moon cast long shadows across the cracked pavement, painting the town hall in streaks of silver and black. I stood across the street, partially hidden behind an old newspaper dispenser, watching. The building loomed in front of me, ordinary and unassuming. But I knew better. Something was off. I had seen the men walk by and disappear behind the building. I heard echoes of their hushed words play again in my head. We'll take him down tonight. I checked my surroundings. The streets were empty. No late-night wanderers, no passing cars. Even the diner, which had been warm and buzzing just hours ago, was dark. I moved quickly, crossing the street with light steps. My heart hammered against my ribs as I neared the side entrance of the town hall. A set of thick wooden doors, latched shut with a heavy padlock. Not the way in. I slipped around to the back of the building, and there they were. Large cellar doors. Steel. Old. Slightly ajar. I took a slow breath, steadying my nerves, and pulled the doors open. The hinges whined softly, echoing in the still night. A staircase spiraled downward, swallowed in darkness. The air changed immediately, dense and humid, thick with the scent of damp earth and something rotten. I hesitated. Then I pulled out my phone's flashlight, clicked it on, and stepped inside. The doors creaked shut behind me. The stone walls dripped with moisture as I crept deeper. The staircase ended in a long, low-ceilinged corridor, the air thick and still. Dim, flickering lights lined the walls, casting the space in a sickly yellow glow. Then I heard something that caught my attention, a low mechanical groan. The sound of something large moving up towards the ground floor. I pressed forward, heart in my throat. The hallway opened up into an enormous cavern, and what I saw was something I'd never have imagined, even in the worst horror movies I'd seen. It was like some sort of twisted underground factory. Dozens of sickly, gray-skinned children worked in eerie silence, their small, frail bodies covered in grime, their fingers raw and blackened. They had no color to their skin. They looked like corpses. Some worked at old, rusted machines, sculpting tools with their hands moving mechanically, like they had done this forever. Not tools made from steel. They were made of mud. Filth. The kind of grime you'd find at the bottom of a wet pile of trash in a landfill. Just thick enough to keep its sculpted form. Some kids packaged the filth with their fingers, pressing the dark, wet material into molds, wrapping it, placing it into various containers. Containers that were identical to ones I had seen in the town's shop windows. Most disturbingly to me was the food. Children combining different piles of that black, disgusting goop together to make recognizable dishes. A sandwich dripping with putrid-smelling slime. A container of mud-coated French fries. Some maggot-filled material being crafted into the shape of eggs, where they were gently placed into a carton. I couldn't help but gag. Others simply stared ahead, blankied, as if nothing existed beyond this place. My shock had kept me from noticing where that noise was coming from. A massive industrial lift groaned in the center of the cavern, crates of filth loaded onto its platform. Through the gap in the ceiling where the lift came down from, I saw them, townspeople waiting above, receiving the crates, stacking them into storage. Food, tools, clothing, baby dolls not dissimilar from the gift I'd received earlier. Everything Ashbrook needed, made from filth, by the children of filth. My stomach turned. I could see the varying levels of product progression on a table in the storage room above. 3 different stacks of soda cans sitting on a table. The stack on the left still fully black, dripping goo. Freshly made, it seemed. The middle stack was still covered in grime, but I could make out faint letters taking form on it. The third and final stack looked to be normal Pepsi that you'd buy at the store. What was this? Before I could even process any of what I'd seen, the heavy slam of a door echoed through the cavern. I ducked behind a crate, heart racing. The councilman entered, dragging a small body bag toward a slab of concrete. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Something moved inside the bag. A soft, muffled whimper. They unzipped it slowly. I caught a glimpse of a young, sickly child, his limbs frail, his face half hidden by shadows. 5 or 6 years old, if I had to guess. He was still alive. I pressed my back harder against the crate, breath shallow, trying to steady myself. The councilmen were still talking, their voices bouncing off the cavern walls, echoing into the foul air. He should be fine through the first phase, right? Maybe. They all get sick. You know that. It's just the way Ashbrook is. A sharp silence. Then a sigh. The man continued. As always, if he survives the trials, we'll send him back up. He'll be old enough to help around town. If not, he can join the rest of them. Now, can you go ahead and tell the doctor that he's ready for his trials? Sure thing, the other man in the shadows replied. I don't envy this kid at all. He's either going to die, or he'll wish he was dead every day for the next decade. I know I did. A realization hit me like ice water down my spine. Every child in Ashbrook got sick. Not just the ones I was looking at now. Every single child. And the only way to survive was through this. Through this place, through the trials, whatever they may be. Through whatever horrors they put them through. If they made it to adulthood, they could go back, live among the others, like nothing ever happened. But if they failed, I swallowed thickly, my gaze darting back to the children at the stations, their rotting skin, their lifeless eyes, then back to the new child barely breathing in the body bag. They didn't survive. They stayed here, underground, in some limbo between life and death, made to work and craft from filth, that which the town needed. I clenched my eyes shut. After a few minutes, which felt like hours, silence finally returned. The men had left. I was wishing that when I opened my eyes, I'd be staring at the ceiling in my bedroom, wishing that it was a dream. I hesitantly squinted through my eyelids. My eyes surveyed the room. I didn't see my ceiling fan. This was no dream. This was hell. I was at a loss. Panicked, I looked around me, trying to find some magic answer or solution. Instead, my sights landed on a familiar figure. My stomach dropped, and my heart skipped a beat. A small boy, working at one of the stations, his tiny fingers pressing dark material into a small box branded with an Ashbrook logo. He looked sickly and gray like the rest of them. There were wounds on his face and arms. They looked infected, like they hadn't been treated for months. Pus was oozing from them, as well as his ears, eyes, and corners of his mouth. My throat closed and my eyes watered. Jackson. That's Jackson, my nephew. That's impossible. Jackson was dead. I'd been to his funeral. I know he was dead. Yet here he stood, defying all human logic and reasoning. Had my brother taken him here for a cure? Why would he be here? This boy was still 5 years old. Frozen in time. He turned his head, and his eyes met mine. Wide. Recognizing. Jackson? I whispered. His breath hitched. A flicker of something human returned to his face. Then, like something inside him snapped, he looked away and kept working, as if he wasn't allowed to acknowledge my presence. Before I could process any of what was going on, the councilmen's voices could be heard coming back down. They dragged yet another body forward. Not in a bag this time. I saw her face. Marley. She was dead, but wrong. Her skin sagged, splitting at the seams. Her panda tattoo hardly recognizable. Vile liquids were oozing from her mouth and eyes. Her body twitched, giving the illusion of life, but I knew better. Nobody could look like that and still be breathing. I watched as all the children turned their heads. Their eyes locked onto Marley. Slight smiles grew as they put down their work and limped right past me, straight to Marley. They reached down, tearing into her flesh, eating whatever was within reach of their small hands. The councilman watched in disgust. She slipped through the cracks, huh? One man said, half laughing. The other man responded more seriously. No, she was born here. You're too young to remember. Her parents took her out of town before her trials. She was sick, but they thought they could get her help somewhere else. We told them it didn't work that way, but they left regardless. Why'd she ever come back? The younger man asked with curiosity. Well, she never did get better. She had a child at some point, but her sickness was passed on to that baby of hers. That poor thing didn't make it more than a week. She swore we took the baby from her. Came looking for M. She couldn't come to terms with reality. Like I said, she was sick. She needed the trials. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed out. A high, sharp scream ripped through the air. I didn't even realize it came from me. I ran. I ran straight to Jackson. I don't know how. I had no control or feeling in my legs, yet they moved forward. I grabbed him, pulling him to his feet. Come on. We're leaving. For a moment, he didn't resist. He followed me through the cavern, up the rusted staircase, out of the cellar. And then, Jackson stumbled. He shuddered violently, his body twitching unnaturally. Filth and pus seeped from his pores, his skin melting like candle wax. No, no, no. I grabbed him and tried to pull him further. I needed to get him into the car, but his arms dissolved in my hands. His eyes met mine one last time. They were full of sorrow, understanding. Then he was gone. Nothing left but rot, pooling at my feet. I choked back tears. They could never leave. None of them could. The children were gone. I raced to my Jeep and scrambled to grab my keys. Through my shakes, I was barely able to put the keys in the ignition. I didn't stop driving. Didn't look back. Didn't breathe until I was miles away. I locked myself in my apartment and began writing everything down, trying to make sense of it. I still hadn't fully processed what had just happened. Then, without a moment's rest, a sharp, burning pain twisted through my stomach. My hands shook. I thought it could be the anxiety, the fear. But then I remembered. The burger. The perfectly seasoned, melt-in-your-mouth burger. I'd eaten filth. I retched into the sink, but it's too late. Something inside me is rotting. Changing. I don't know how much time I have left. I don't know what will happen to me. But I know one thing. You can't outrun the sickness. If you're reading this, please do not go to Ashbrook. Do not eat their food. Do not ask about the children. Just stay home. Write that article about an albino fox. Whatever you do, just stay away from that town. Children of filth cannot be saved. I believe, now that I have made it to adulthood, that I was given a key too soon. I was in 3rd grade when my dad got a job at Mazier Faber Optics. He would be working from 2 till 11, making more money than he had ever made before, but there was a catch. Dad had always worked from 6 to 2, which meant he would get home before 3, so he could get me off the bus. Mom had a typical 9 to 5, something she couldn't change, and that left 2 hours where I would be unattended. 2 hours didn't seem that long though, and the money was so much better than what he had made at the phone company, so they decided to give me some trust. I wasn't a kid who lacked responsibility, and I didn't usually have trouble following rules, so they decided I was old enough to be trusted to let myself in and lock the door behind me. Just let yourself in, make a snack, do your homework, and don't answer the door or the phone if someone comes around or calls. Can you do that? I nodded, thinking it sounded exciting, and so I became a latchkey kid. It went pretty well for a while. I would come home, make some Nesquik and bagel bites, do my homework, and then go watch cartoons until Mom came home and started dinner. It was a good system, until I came home to find something was different. I came home from school, worrying about the math homework in my bag, when I found that the door was unlocked. I put my key in, meaning to turn it so I could get inside, but the door just pushed open as it creaked into the quiet house. I felt a little chill run up me. The door was never unlocked. My parents were meticulous about locking it, always had been, and as I looked into the seemingly empty house, I felt sure that I didn't want to go in there. Go inside, make a snack, do your homework, and watch some TV until I get home. That was my mother's voice echoing in my head, and it moved me past the wall of fear that was building in me. I went inside, closed and locked the door, and went to the kitchen for my snack. I had lived in this house my whole life, and in that whole time, I had never felt unsafe there. It was my home. You're supposed to feel safe in your home, but as I walked through the living room and toward the kitchen, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was that feeling I felt sometimes when I got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, the feeling of monsters watching you. But it was the first time I had felt it in the daytime. Something was watching me, something unfriendly, and as I moved into the kitchen, I saw something move out of the corner of my eye. It was gone when I looked, but I was pretty sure it had been there. I shrugged it off at the time though, and went to get my chocolate milk and chips. I was scared, but I was also 8. When you're 8, it isn't uncommon to jump at shadows or think there might be ghosts or something. You know it can't be real, but that doesn't stop it from making you scared. I took the powder out of the cabinet, took the milk out of the fridge, and spooned powder into my glass as I prepared to mix it. I had the milk up, ready to pour, when I saw something reflected in the side of the glass. It wasn't exactly the reflection of a person, but as the milk slowly splashed into the cup, I saw something lumpy and ill-defined peeking at me from the door to the kitchen. I couldn't tell what it was, and when the milk spilled over the rim and onto the countertop, I almost dropped the jug. I managed to get the paper towels before the milk spilled onto the floor, but when I peeked at the door, no one was there. I put my chips in a bowl and got my homework out of my backpack as I went to sit at the dinner table. Unlike usual, I sat with my back to the door out to the backyard. If there was something here, something I was becoming pretty sure there was, I wanted to be able to run if the time came. As I bent over my work, I kept seeing something peek around the edge of the kitchen door. It was always gone when I looked up, but not quite. It was like catching a kid peeking around a corner who pulled his head back a little too slowly, and I almost imagined I could hear whoever it was giggle as I almost saw him. My teeth were chattering, and I'll never know how I stopped myself from crying, but I somehow kept my cool as I worked through my math homework. It was the most scared I had ever been in my entire life, even more than the time I had snuck into the living room to watch scary movies, and I was having trouble finishing my math. Who could focus on fractions when something was in your house, watching you? I was just scribbling now, barely paying attention to what I was writing. I was more interested in trying to see this thing that was stalking me. I couldn't catch more than glimpses, but it was bald and looked fat. It had no neck, its head and shoulders simply mounts of fat, but it was the eyes and mouth that scared me the most. Its eyes were little more than dark, piggy circles. There was no white to them. They looked like doll's eyes as they stared at me, and the mouth was drawn up in a grin. The lips were wet, the teeth so shiny that the thing must be running its tongue over them constantly. The eyes, despite having no real color other than black, looked hungry, and the mouth was like that of the wolf in one of my cartoons. He was another big bad wolf just looking for a pig to gobble up, and I was the one he had found at home. I might not know what these fractions meant, but I had figured out one thing. I had figured out that I had to get out of there. Whatever it wasn't a monster or a boogeyman. That thing was human, and the longer I sat here, the more I could smell it. It was giving off a smell like my Uncle Tom did at Christmas sometimes. It smelled sweet and sour and a lot like old sweat, something I would later learn was skin-expelling liquor. As a kid, I just knew it smelled bad, and I wanted to get away before it decided to gobble me up. I thought and thought, trying to find some reason why I would need to go outside, and then I saw the trash. It was full, the empty biscuit cans sitting on top like an old snake's skin, and that's when I got the idea. The garbage was one of my chores, as long as there wasn't any glass in it, so after cleaning up my homework, I went to the can and started taking the bag out, so I could take it outside. I headed for the back door, knowing it was watching me, and when I opened the back door I heard it. Heavy footsteps running after me. I slammed the back door and dropped the bag, running for the fence that separated the front and backyard. I heard it hit the door, heard it trip over the bag, and heard it fall on the back porch, but I was already around the house and heading for the neighbor's house. If it had been any other day I would have kept running, looking for someone who was home. But I saw the Staub's car in the driveway and knew they were home. I heard the gate open and close, but I was already hammering on my neighbor's door. I heard someone drop something in the kitchen, heard Mrs. Staub's come hurrying from the kitchen, and out of the corner of my eye I could see the thing coming around my house and toward the neighbor's house. I pounded even harder, wrenching at the knob, and when Mrs. Staub opened the door, I shot inside and yelled for her to close the door because something was after me. She looked up, and she must have seen something because she slammed and locked the door. Then she called the police, and after that, she called my mom. The police beat Mom home, but only just. I told Mom what I had seen, told her something had been stalking me in the house, and how the door had been unlocked when I got home. She reassured me that it was fine, that it was probably nothing. She said it was probably just my mind playing tricks on me, but Mrs. Staub told her that nothing had been playing tricks on her mind, and she had seen it too. It was a fat, naked man who tried to come right up my porch steps, and I'll testify to that before the throne of God. Mom was very confused, and what the police discovered didn't help matters much. They found a large man, one with very little neck, hiding in my closet as if he just expected me to come back after he had chased me out of the house. They didn't find any ID on him for obvious reasons, but they found his clothes folded neatly in the backyard underneath my mother's rose bushes. Mom told me later that he had a record of doing stuff with kids, but that this was the first time he had escalated into anything like this. I'm thankful that they got him before he could actually hurt a child, but he was responsible for the scariest day of my life. After that, my mom asked my aunt to come meet me at the house when I got off the bus and to sit with me until she got home. That kept on until I was in middle school, and Mom decided I could probably look after myself again. I still think about that day a lot, and it's probably why I kept my kids in after-school care for as long as I did. In 2016, despite how cliché it sounds, I was working as a private investigator in rural Oregon. Most people make the stereotype that private detectives and investigators have walk-in clients, but that simply isn't true. I get almost all of my cases from clients by phone, and the call I got in that June was no exception. The client, a man named Jonathan Alexander, was calling about the disappearance of his father, Nathan Alexander. Jonathan's father had gone missing ever since a solo deer hunting trip in the backwoods of our little Oregon town, and the search parties and official parties hadn't turned up anything. In most cases like this, you're looking for a body in the woods, not a live person. But Jonathan was hopeful, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. In this case, I took my go bag. A duffel bag and its contents were a bottle of water, a first aid kit, my Taurus Raging Hunter, a bag of Ziploc bags, my wallet and phone, and food. A Taurus Raging Hunter revolver might have been overkill, but I was planning to go into the woods. And the woods can be a dangerous place. This part of Oregon was stocked full of cougars, mountain lions, bears, wolves, moose, and some others, and almost everyone carried a heavier firearm when going into the backwoods. The first place on my schedule was Jonathan's house, where I would meet him in person, and have an interview. As I pulled up into his dirt driveway, I got a sense of the kind of person he was. His house was a 25-foot trailer stuck to the ground, with a backyard and patio facing the mountains. "Are you Jonathan?" I asked the man waiting for me. He was tall, at least 6'5", and wearing a checkered button-up, a trucker cap, and jeans. "Yeah," he replied. "You're Inspector Jacob, right? Come inside, I'll tell you the details. I also have some things that could help you, depending on how willing you are." I walked inside the trailer, and the interior was everything I expected. The walls were lined with taxidermized bass and catfish, as well as several mounted deer heads, and rifles propped up on display. A dirty kitchen with piles of dishes was one corner, and a small two-person dinner table. Jonathan, John for short, and I sat down. Jonathan offered me a beer, but I declined. I never drank on a job. I started with the regular questions. Where was he last seen? Who was with him? What happened leading up to the night of the disappearance? John replied, telling the whole story. My dad, Nathan, was a hunter and fisherman. Hunting and fishing was his life. He always had a rifle or a fishing rod. He's in his 60s and was in the military for 7 years, had a few tours in Afghanistan. On that night, he wanted to go solo buck hunting in the evening, so I dropped him off in a dirt road near his favorite spot. He didn't come back for 2 days. This was somewhat normal. He sometimes hunted overnight or just got lost. After a week passed, I got really worried. I could feel that something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. I called the sheriff, and they organized a search party for 3 nights. We went in every direction, covered all the ground, and you know what? Not a single thing. Not a candy bar, no footsteps leading past his spot, no trail, nothing. After he was declared deceased, I went out myself to search. I know he's still out there, I know it. And where is this dirt road? John marked the road on the GPS on my phone, and I thanked him and left. I had a no-solve, no-pay rule, so I wouldn't get paid unless I actually found Nathan, dead or alive. My next stop was at the sheriff's office, in the middle of my small town. I drove past multiple roadside stores until I reached the parking lot of the sheriff's office. I parked and walked into the place, going up to the front desk where a tall and skinny deputy was doing paperwork and chewing gum, presumably as a substitute for cigarettes. I told him that I was looking into the disappearance of Nathan Alexander, and he sent me to the sheriff's office. The sheriff, a balding man in his 50s named Clyde, showed a forced smile as I walked inside. A stained American flag was pinned to the wall, along with dozens of missing person posters and wanted posters. So, Inspector, is this missing guy a friend of yours? He asked. Nah, I replied. A client wants me to find him. Nathan is the guy's dad. Well, you're in luck, Clyde replied. We haven't gotten much criminal activity, so I can show you some of the search party reports. Clyde reached into his desk and pulled out a stack of papers and photos, which I flicked through. One of the photos captured an image showing a trail of footprints, ending abruptly. And what is this? I asked. It's the strangest part of the case. The footprints leading to Nathan's favorite hunting spot just stopped. No trail leading somewhere else, no tire tracks, no ATV tracks, nothing. It's like he just up and vanished into thin air. I sighed. This case was going to be a hard one. What else of interest was there? I asked, looking through the files. Clyde pulled out a satellite image of the woods, with a sharper written on the spot where Nathan had gone missing. This is the entire area in which we estimate that Nathan could have walked around in the time he was gone, Clyde stated. We checked every bit of it, and guess what? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But there was one thing we found of interest. Which is? I asked. There was a pattern. Every time we checked a place, we heard Nathan's radio coming from somewhere. I raised an eyebrow. Sheriff Clyde continued, but it was very, very faint. Could barely hear it. And another strange thing was when we went to search for Nathan, in the entire area where he went missing, all the birds and animals were quiet, even the crickets. As soon as we left the area of the supposed disappearance, the sound all came back. I checked the watch. It was early evening. After jotting down all the notes I could gather, I thanked the sheriff and left. My next stop, the woods. By the time I pulled up to the dirt road in my pickup truck, it was well into getting dark. This wasn't the ideal time for me to search through the area and find clues. Every detective knows how important the first 45 hours are. The place was exactly as John had described it. It was extremely rural, just a few miles away from a mountain range, and it was completely silent. The forest should have been alive, with birds chirping, wild turkeys moving about, crickets chirping, but the night was dead. Turning on my headlamp, I found Nathan's footsteps from when he was last seen and started combing through the area. Just like Clyde and Jonathan had said, the trail abruptly stopped in the middle of the woods. Nothing, no other signs that Nathan was even there. It was as if he just up and vanished. Suddenly, I heard some rustling behind me. It was fully dark by now, and nobody should have been there beside me. The sound came again, except it was now in front of me, but just out of the reach of my headlamp. Who's there? I yelled. Show yourself. I'm armed. For dramatization, I flicked the revolver holster from my Taurus on my belt. Suddenly, something tapped me right on the back. I didn't have time to pull out my gun, and considering that whoever was doing this was probably some drunk guy, I wouldn't need it. I turned and threw a Mike Tyson haymaker in the thing's direction, and ended up hitting a tree and nearly breaking my wrist. That in the split second that I was proud of my Mike Tyson haymaker, I realized that I had punched a tree and that my knuckles were actually bleeding. Whoever was behind me, if there was someone behind me, they were long gone. And that was when the laughing started. Actually, it was more like cackling. Weird, crazy, and unnatural cackling. Whatever you'd call it, it was unsettling anyway. I pulled out my revolver designed to drop bears and fired a deafening shot into the air. The laughing, everything stopped for a bit, and I almost put my guard down. Then I heard something whisper, just an inch away from my ear, that it said, "Leave this place." And the next thing I know, I hear the sound of a million running footsteps catching up to me, and I GTFO. I ran right out of the woods, fast enough to outrun Usain Bolt. Adrenaline is one heck of a drug. I jumped in my pickup truck, turned the engine, and peeled out of there, all in record time. Whatever was behind me was still chasing me behind the car. I looked into the rearview mirror to try to look at the thing, which was running at least 80 miles per hour to keep up with me, and I saw nothing. Well, it wasn't a conceptual nothing. It was nothing in the sense that it was nothing my brain could comprehend and understand. There was a huge blurry shape running after me, dark as the night, and fuzzy around the edges. It was as if somebody took a huge mass of static from an 80s TV, made it into some sort of creature, and put it on a dirt road at 9 o'clock to chase some poor private investigator. I turned the road, drove down the road until I reached the town. The thing was, obviously, gone. I parked at a gas station parking lot and threw up once my body realized how much running I had done. The next day, I headed to a woman named Meredith's house. I had heard about her from when I was at the bar the night I saw the demon thing, by some paranormal junkies who were particularly interested in what I said. Meredith apparently owned a spiritual massage shop at the edge of town, having the shop based on the first floor of her house. She also knew a thing or two about paranormal entities, the occult, monsters, ghouls, and, well, you get the gist. I pulled up into the driveway of her shop and knocked on the door. "We're close." "Asshole!" Somebody, probably Meredith, yelled. I looked at the store hours taped on the front door. Today was a Friday, and according to her, probably outdated store hours chart, she was, as a matter of fact, open. "You're open, so stop being lazy." I yelled right back. Meredith groaned and opened the triple-locked door. In person, she was a short Latino woman with long black hair and a hood, wearing a trench coat and jeans, which was totally not suspicious. "What do you want?" she snapped. "What I want is to know what is in those woods. And lady, don't piss me off, I'm still on a hangover. You study the paranormal and supernatural. Or am I wrong?" "No, you're not wrong." "Good. Because yesterday, I got bullied and chased by some weird demon thing while looking for a missing man in his 60s. Meredith's face went pale. I taught myself how to learn and read expressions people make, and by the looks of it, she knew exactly what I was talking about. "Come in, I might be able to help you." Like Jonathan's house, I was easily able to tell the interior of the house from the inside. There were plants everywhere on the walls, growing in giant pots on the floor, as well as shelves stocked full of beakers and test tubes, and a few bags full of strange substances. That I sat down on a worn-out couch, while Meredith assessed my situation. "First of all, who told you about me?" she asked. "Some British fellow named Ron," I said. But then again, I was drunk, so he might have been a John or Bob. "How did you say this thing looked like?" "Big. Dark. Blurry. I couldn't actually see it since it was at least 100 feet away, but it was running 80 miles per hour, whatever it was. Huge, must have been over 20 feet big." "Did you look at it directly?" Meredith asked. I answered plainly no. I looked at it through the rearview mirror, and even then I couldn't see it well. "Must be why you're alive." "What was that?" I asked. "What you just described is what we in the business call Nagalagu is." "Nagalagu?" I muttered. "The heck is that?" "No one really knows," Meredith replied. She, whatever Nagalagu is ancient. Has been in these woods for probably over a century, and no one knows where he came from. You said that you were looking for a missing guy, right? Well, Nagalaga probably took him. Nagalaga might eat him, might let him go, might keep him for eternity. I don't know. Then how do I kill this thing? I asked. I need to close this case. You probably can't, Meredith said. But whatever you do, don't look directly at Nagalagu. or your mind will literally melt at the unfathomable horror, and you will die. Do not look at it. Don't look at the demon thing, I said. Gotcha. Do you have, any herbs or materials that will stop Nagalaga from hurting me or doing anything? Yes, actually I do. It's white ash blessed by a shaman. If you sprinkle it over yourself, or any weapons you have, it should be more effective against any supernatural being. Meredith stood up and walked towards a cabinet, and pulled out a large Ziploc bag of white ash, which seemed to glow and vibrate, and she handed it to me. This ain't free, she said. It's $100, asshole. I sighed, and reached into my wallet, pulled out $100, and handed it to Meredith in exchange for the white ash. Hey, Meredith called out as I packed up my stuff and headed for the door. Yeah, be careful. Like that was even possible. I got out of there and drove to the gas station, where I planned to get my supplies to hunt Nagalagu and find Nathan Alexander. But before that, I needed to fuel up. I bought incendiary rounds for my revolver that the gas station surprisingly sold, and I ordered pineapple pizza while listening to Piano Man by Billy Joel. After I finished up and threw out my garbage, I had devised a plan which involved flares, a bottle of vodka, a huge jug filled with gasoline, and a Molotov cocktail. The cashier, a guy named John, seemed very interested in the thing I bought from the gas station. He was a tall guy in his 50s with a graying beard, a trucker cap, and an attitude. What are all these things for? He asked as I heaved the heavy gasoline tank onto the counter, along with some other flammable and extremely dangerous things. Oh, nothing, I answered, trying not to sound suspicious. Just trying to take care of a pest problem. But John didn't see that as nothing. You're going into the woods, ain't ya? I was caught off guard at how easily and accurately he knew what I was doing. Yes? I replied. Well, I'm off work after this shift, so I'll come with you. Or, I could just report to the police that a private investigator is buying suspicious amounts of flammables and gasoline, along with 45 Magnum incendiary rounds for a Taurus Raging Hunter revolver. You Army? I asked. Nah, he replied. Been in the U.S. Marines, had 2 tours in Afghanistan. I didn't see any reason why John shouldn't come with me, and besides, I could use his military and combat skills, which might be useful. And I wasn't going to carry a 55-gallon tank full of gasoline in the middle of the woods alone. Fine, I said. Let's do this. A few hours later, just as the sun was setting, John and I got out of my pickup truck in front of the woods. John had brought his trusty 12-gauge, packed with Dragon's Breath incendiary rounds and a mini flamethrower. John would be my backup and the bait, while I carried the gasoline tank duct taped to an explosive Molotov cocktail. The plan was we would go to the woods, to the spot where I had last been attacked by Sagoth, and wait. Once we heard a sign of him, we would both put on our blindfolds, to avoid having our souls sucked out by the unfathomable sight of the eldritch cosmic horror. Ready? John asked. Yeah, I said. Just don't shoot me while you have your blindfold on. We walked into the woods in silence, and after a mile or so, I reached the spot where Nathan was last seen. We sat there and waited an hour or so until all the noise suddenly stopped, and I heard the sound of something massive dragging across the forest floor. Put on your blindfold, I said, putting on mine. We can't risk seeing this thing. John nodded, grinned, and put the blindfold on. Whatever it was sounded massive. It said in a demonic and ancient voice, "Leave this place, John," and I fired a shot into the direction of the voice. And although my bullet missed by a mile, the old man's shot was a direct hit. Although I couldn't hear it, I saw the light from the blast of fire, sparks, and flames coming from the barrel of John's shotgun, and it hit the demon monster. The thing screeched, and we moved back a few steps, still blind. And without warning, the ground opened beneath us. What the fuck? John and I fell into the cavern beneath us, 6 feet. You okay? I asked. Never been better, John replied. What is this place? I lifted my blindfold and looked around, to see that we had fallen into a subterranean tunnel that led deeper into the earth. Anyone there? Fucking help. A voice screamed, presumably Nathan's based on the circumstances. We ran down the tunnel and searched for Nathan, and we found the man, lying on the cave floor with a broken leg. We're gonna get you out of here, I said. I heard a screech come from the entrance to the tunnel, as Nagalagu crawled down, breaking the walls. I reached down and picked up the tank of gasoline, had my eyes closed, and waited until Nagalagu was just close enough, my heart beating. Get out! I lit the Molotov, yelled at John to take cover, just as Nagalagu got within a dozen meters in our range. I had previously sprinkled the white ash Meredith had given me on the gasoline tank, for extra effectiveness, and so that could kill Nagalagu if the explosion didn't. Nagalagu was only a few meters away from us. I lit the gasoline bomb and threw it, and as it exploded I grinned. Gotcha, asshole. So the funny thing is, a group of redneck hunters found us later. They had apparently found the hole and the explosion crater and investigated. John and I had suffered some mild burns from the enormous gasoline explosion, but the missing guy, Nathan, came out harmless besides the broken leg he already had before. The redneck family dragged us all the way to their pickup truck, then drove us to the hospital, where we both got treated for our injuries. Nathan was found and reunited after a long disappearance, and Jonathan paid me in the thousands, with the money I didn't expect him to have. When I went back to the place where Nathan had disappeared, and where I had blown Nagalago high to the sky, I found a very strange, giant, half-human skeleton where I remembered Nagalaga getting blown up. Nathan Alexander was found, and I had killed one of the things that went bump in the night. Case closed. Don't fuck with the woods, kids. My grandfather was an exceptional man. Born in crushing poverty, he took to a life of crime in his teenage years before straightening up and joining the British Indian Army, where he served with distinction. After India's independence, he won multiple national-level gold medals in wrestling and subsequently completed his education and started a successful trucking company. He had lived such an extraordinary life, he spent his old age just reliving his memories with friends and family through his great storytelling skills. Us grandkids just loved to sit around him as he regaled us with tales from his well-lived life. He always seemed so joyful when he did it too. But there was this one story that he avoided telling any of us until he was almost on his deathbed. One story that has stayed with me, even after all these years. I remember it all like it just happened yesterday, how his eyes widened and his bony hands trembled in fear as he recounted the most frightening experience of his life. Thankfully, I had a tape recorder close at hand, and I can tell you what he told me in his exact words. Are you sure you want to record this? Because it's not very pleasant. Okay then. Just don't tell your mother what I tell you here. I don't want to be held responsible for any nightmares you might end up having because of this. So all this happened back in 1942, in the midst of the Arakan campaign. The Japanese had pushed all the way into Burma, Myanmar. The campaign was the first offensive push by the Allied army to push the Japs back. And let me tell you, it was a spectacular failure. We were not prepared for the attack. Remember, this was back when Indians couldn't rise about the rank of Subedar Major, and all command posts were occupied by the British. And they had no idea what the fuck they were doing. They had little to no experience fighting in the muggy jungles, our transport infrastructure. Our supply lines were pathetically weak. Hell, Bengal, that was supposed to be the launch pad for the invasion, suffered a devastating famine just a year later. I'm sure you must have read about that in school. The Japanese, on the other hand, were well fortified and carried out ambushes on a regular basis. It wasn't surprising to have entire patrol squads get wiped out in the blink of an eye. The attackers would suddenly appear out of the shadows and disappear before help could arrive. It was terrible. We were on edge all the time. Every branch that snapped, every leaf that rustled got our fingers pushing against the trigger of our rifles, compounding all that were the harsh conditions. We were far more likely to be killed by disease than war. The food we ate was barely enough to keep us on our feet. The threat of malaria and dysentery always loomed large. Snakes, spiders, and other insects larger than anything we'd ever seen crawled on our emaciated bodies as we slept. Swarms of flies that looked like dark little clouds descended on the corpses of our brothers. It was hell. We were permanently covered in layers of dirt. Rains lashed the forest at an alarming frequency, turning the weather so humid it felt like our skin was starting to melt. The repeated spells of rain pretty much destroyed our communication lines, and the ground had turned so boggy that some soldiers had gotten stuck in them, right up to their thighs. It was so bad that at times command structure had completely broken down, and disorganized chunks of the army were operating almost independently from each other. It was in such a situation that nightmare appeared in our lives. One of the worst aspects of fighting in the jungle was the psychological warfare. The Japs would kidnap our soldiers, torture them for information, brutalize them beyond what should be humanly acceptable, and sent them back, barely clinging to life. We could never save them, and I think that was the point. To watch our comrades, our brothers in arms, waste away in front of us, while our meager medical supplies could do nothing to help them. But that wasn't the worst of it. You see, one thing they delighted in doing was using our soldiers as bait to draw the rest of us out. They would torture our soldiers to the brink of death and tie them up to a tree, usually in a clearing, and hide in the forest. If we went out to help, they would pick us off from the trees. All we could do is just stay hidden and listen to the agony-filled death throes of our fellow soldiers. Wait till the last drop of life was slowly squeezed out of them as they cried out for their mothers. It was one such incident that changed everything, or at least an incident that looked deceptively like the nightmare that we had gotten used to. James Wavell, a distant relative of Archibald Wavell, the then commander-in-chief of the British Indian Army and later viceroy, was in charge of us. He was the one who sent us out on patrol that day. There were about a dozen of us, cutting our way through the jungle when we heard the screams. You see, in forests, it's actually quite hard to track down the source of a loud noise like that. If someone screams, it feels like it's coming from everywhere, like the woods are echoing the sound and speaking to you themselves. But not this time. Instinctively, almost on a primal level, we knew where the screams were coming from. And almost as if in a daze, we gripped our guns tight in our hands and followed, or more likely we were led there, if that makes any sense. It didn't take us long to find the man who was screaming. He was dressed in Indian Army fatigues, or at least the trousers. His shirt was torn and hanging from his shoulders. He was, God, this is hard. He was tied to a tree and had his hands on his stomach, trying to push down his intestines that were spilling out like thick, bloody little ropes. And his screams. It's like I can still hear them, like they're still making my ears ring. The pain in those screams, I could feel it in my bones. I began walking towards him before I even realized what I was doing. I felt a hand on my shoulder and was pulled back forcefully. I looked into the eyes of the man who pulled me back. They were wide open, alarmed, like he knew something was seriously wrong here. He shook his head slowly, warning me not to go ahead even as that man continued to scream. I gulped and nodded. We spread out into the woods with our guns drawn, keeping each other in sight, to brace ourselves for the Jap ambush. I winced as twigs snapped underneath my boots. I realized I was afraid. Not of the Japanese presumably hiding in the trees somewhere close to us. No, but the wounded man in front of us. It was so bizarre. I can't explain it, but I felt it, deep in my soul. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to run away, to keep running until I left this man far behind me. I took up position slightly to the man's left and began waiting. Waiting for him to die, and for it, whatever it was, to end. But it didn't. The man screamed, he cried, he sobbed, he called for help, but he just didn't seem to die. Minutes turned into hours, and the sun began dipping beneath the horizon, but he kept on screaming. We stood rooted to out spots, unable to move, as if mesmerized by the strange performance. The moon climbed up into the sky, and the man's blood began gleaming under the white light that beamed down on him. But he still didn't die. My legs were aching, my neck was stiff, and I could hear someone to my right crying softly in terror. It was like we knew that it was not that man, but we who were about to die. And then it happened. The man stopped crying. Then the world was plunged into silence. And I do mean complete silence. We couldn't hear anything. Anything. No birds, no crickets, no leaves rustling in the wind. We couldn't even hear ourselves breathing. It was like the forest itself was holding its breath. And then the man got up. He easily tore off the rope holding him in place and jumped up on his feet. His intestines hung limply from his belly, which looked like someone had punched a hole through it. Fuck. Half his gut was gone. Just straight gone. I could see straight through it. No man can live through an injury like that, let alone be completely fine like he seemed to be. You see how scared I am right now? Do you see how my hands are trembling even after all these years, just by thinking about that night? So you can imagine just how terrified I was when that man glared at me. His eyes shot up to mine, like he knew where I was, like he'd always known where I was. There was such malice in his eyes I almost passed out from the fear. And then he screeched. It was loud and shrill, like thousands of babies screaming into our ears. I remember quaking in my boots just looking at that hateful snarl on his face. He began running towards me, with these big, loping strides covering half the distance within seconds. Thankfully, that sudden burst of motion had restored my senses, and I started running away from him. I dropped my gun, my backpack, and just bolted. I leapt over small rocks and overgrown roots, ducked under branches, waded through thickets, stumbled in the dark, but kept on running. My boots at one point got stuck in the soggy mud, but I pulled myself free and pumped my legs to keep running. I stole a glance over my shoulder and saw him gaining on me. intestines slapping against his thigh as he ran. He was smiling, ear to ear, like the chase was the best thing to have ever happened to him, like he wanted to take his time and truly savor the hunt. Move, move, move. Must go faster, I thought. I heard screams behind me, accompanied by loud tearing and squelching sounds. He was ripping the patrol squad apart, one by one, and soon it was going to be my turn. My lungs were on fire, each breath a desperate act of survival. My legs were starting to wobble. I knew I would not cast long. I couldn't outrun him, but I could hide. I found this small crevice where this giant tree had been uprooted, tucked away in a dark corner of the woods. I scrambled for the tiny hole and cloaked myself in the shadows. I wasn't even thinking about snakes or some other venomous creature waiting for me in the dark. I just wanted to get the fuck away from that thing. I pulled my knees close to my chest, felt my heart hammering against my sternum, and waited. Waited for that thing to find me and put an end to it all. I heard his footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Felt the leaves shift and crunch underneath his bare feet. Then he began whistling. It was oddly melodious, like a bird singing an ode to the forest. I heard the fallen tree creak as he stepped on it and glided towards me. Dark drops of blood came crashing down on the ground inches from my feet. He called for me, in my mother's voice. She had been dead for over 5 years by that point. Gently, with love, he called for me, and laughed when I didn't move. I put my hands on my helmet, pulled it down in front of my eyes, and began crying as silently as I could. It was over. I knew I was going to die, but for some odd reason, he didn't kill me. Maybe it's because he wanted to leave one survivor alive to go out and talk about him, spread the terror he had inflicted on our patrol squad. I don't know. I don't even know when he left. I spent the whole night there, alone, shivering in that little hole. Even when the sun had come up and bathed the forest floor with light, I still refused to come out. Such was the extent of my fear. It wasn't until another patrol came across me that I felt safe enough to come out. They had to carry me back on a stretcher. I was delirious with fear, and every muscle in my body was exhausted. But I was alive. That was the closest I came to that thing. But that wasn't my only encounter with it. All throughout my stay there I heard stories about it. From my own regiment and others, hell, even the Japs had supposedly run across it. This immortal thing that imitated voices, pretended to be wounded, and tore apart entire squads at a time. Or how he came to you at night, when you were sleeping, whispering utter hatred into your ears before dragging you away and slicing you to pieces. Some patrol squads discovered remains of corpses in odd places, like decapitated heads on top of trees or limbs splayed out in strange patterns near the base camp. At one point we feared we were losing more men to that thing than to the Japanese. I'm sure they felt the same. All the horrors that I witnessed in that country, the air bombings, the disease, the burnt corpses, were all nothing compared to that night. I remember how relieved I felt when we marched into Rangoon. Even with all the guns and artillery going off around me, all I could think of was that I was glad I was out of that damned forest. My wife will not stop eating. April 23rd. Chapter 1. My wife's sickness. I texted in a group chat with all of my friends. Are we ready for tonight? Everyone responded agreeing that they couldn't wait anymore. How all of them would get drunk and have the best time of their life. We had a party for one of our other friends, just stupid guys stuff, hanging out, the fun adult life. I was getting ready to party with all my friends tonight, food, alcohol, games, and more good stuff, if you know what I mean. I dropped a big cooler by the front door, and I heard a sudden loud thud from upstairs. I ran up to see my wife on the floor, holding her stomach hard, like she could squeeze out her own organs. I ran up to her asking if she was okay. She only grunted and whimpered like someone had just attacked her. I grabbed my phone and called 911, asking for an ambulance. I was with her the entire ride to the hospital, holding, gripping, tightening her hand with mine. She was in pain, and I couldn't do anything. I didn't even know what was happening to her. After a few hours of waiting at the hospital, impatiently walking around the room, waiting for any kind of news, it felt like days. Until I heard the click of the door opening, a doctor walked inside of the room with a chart. I asked him, "William, finally, what the hell happened to her?" The doctor sighed, looking at the chart again. "Doctor, we don't exactly know. Her stomach seemed to have just grew a few inches. You'd normally see this in a long-term effect, gas, toxic waste, fluid buildup. It also looked scarred." "William, what, like something cut her stomach?" "Doctor, and healed it in a matter of minutes. It's not something that even we can explain. But what we can do is offer her a prescription of probiotic supplements, something to help her pass waste easier, and maybe something to help with the pain. William, what else can we do? This isn't normal, right? Doctor, I'll say give it a few days, 2 to 3 weeks maybe, come back and we'll see how everything is. William, right, thanks, doctor. I took her home, made sure she was staying in bed to rest, and made her take her pills. She hates pills, but she needed to. I unfortunately had to cancel of my friends last minute. They whined, but I didn't really care at that moment. My wife was in pain, something strange had happened to her, and I felt sick to my stomach, this feeling of weakness, unable to do anything only to wait and see what stupid fucking pills are going to do. Sorry, stress of the job was why I was excited to go out with my friends. We went back home, and I had trouble sleeping. My wife kept making weird clicking noises and stomach grumbles. I tried waking her up a bunch. She wouldn't wake up. So I eventually tuned it out and went to bed. April 24th. I woke up today to my wife, well on the toilet, vomiting and well shitting. She was sitting on the toilet holding a bucket in her lap. It was like this for an hour. I went outside of the bathroom after 10 minutes of pauses between long coughing and gagging on her own vomit. I couldn't take it. I called the doctor again, asking if this was in any way, shape, or form even possible for someone. He told me that, "Doctor, it's possible the sudden change in her stomach caused something to make the pills more effective than needed, and to just be by her side with water, a lot of water." Another 10 minutes passed by of god-awful sounds that I couldn't bear to hear it anymore. I wanted them to stop, but if they did, I'm worried of what that would mean. Would it? No. I have to be there for her. And finally, I ran into the bathroom, holding a cup of water near her and putting my hand on her shoulder. "William, honey. Honey, are you all right?" She breathed out weakly, trying to grab the cup. Of course I helped her, moved her head back and poured some water slowly inside of her mouth. It smelled awful in there. I didn't care at the moment. My wife looked like shit, and all I could offer her was a cup of goddamn water. She choked on it. I grabbed a few tissues and cleaned around her mouth. I had the curiosity to peek inside of the bucket and noticed a red liquid mixed with everything else. I knew it was blood, a lot of it. How could it not be? But there were a lot more fluids combined with everything. After a long 6 hours of cleaning everything, the toilet, the bucket, the bathroom, the shower, my wife. I told my job I couldn't come in for a few days. My wife was sick. I got a bit of an attitude from my boss, but I didn't care. My wife was my importance. She was my priority. I loved her. Even with everything going on, she had not prayed today. I knew she was a Christian, so were her parents. She was born into it, raised with it. When I hadn't seen her put her hands together like she always did, even when sick, especially when sick. I didn't like that thought. I put her to bed after everything. She asked me, coughing like she was about to spit out her lungs, "Erica, could you get me something to eat?" My eyes widened a bit, the pure shock of that question. I'm not sure why it affected me so much, the thought of vomiting all that time. How could she even eat? But thinking about it, how could she not eat? Her body was probably the most fragile and weak that it's ever been. I agreed, told her I'd get her a bunch of different stuff. I went downstairs. We had a lot of leftovers because, well, we ordered a lot and didn't cook much. I brought her a box of half-finished pizza, mashed potatoes, a brunch leftover we did last Sunday, a few drinks, and a bunch of other things. She started eating them like her stomach was on the verge of eating itself. She chomped down on everything I had brought her. I didn't think of it much at first. In all honesty, I didn't know what to think. I was worried about her. I was just happy she was eating after that horrible morning. April 25th, 27th. She was in bed all those days. I called around families, friends, anyone who could potentially give some sort of explanation of what was going on. She was eating and eating. I had to order $200 worth of food for her, and only her. V only had 2 meals so far. I'm hungry too, but not as much as she is hungry. I've been texting my friend Tom. I've known him since we were kids. He's been as helpful as he could be. What could he really do? I let him know how she was, how things were, and what mostly was happening. I was tired. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her yell out to me she was hungry. I told her a few times that the delivery guy was a few minutes away. I was tired. I already said that I hadn't slept for a long time. 36 constant hours awake, blinking away from collapsing, hungry and worried. I hadn't even realized by then, but my eyes and body felt so heavy. It felt like tiredness was adding extra weight to my body, and then, without even realizing it, I woke up joltingly and looked around. It had only been 2 hours. It took me a good minute to remember what was going on, my wife, the food outside. Right. I got up and got the food at the door. It had piled up. I'm sure they were probably asking questions. It didn't matter. I picked it all up and brought it upstairs, keeping a few things for myself. I turned on the television and began eating. I had a bunch of fried stuff from everywhere. I just needed to eat something. I heard her upstairs eating, crunching, savoring, like she had never eaten before. I wasn't disgusted, but I was concerned about what I was hearing. How could this happen? Why was she like this? I shook it off and took a few bites of my food, until I realized something crucial. I had ordered fried fish. I must have ordered it without even realizing. I just picked a bunch of food. It didn't seem to matter to her. And I was tired. My wife is allergic to seafood. Anything that is fish, it could kill her. I dropped everything and ran upstairs, practically launching myself into the room. I even thought about breaking the door down. Thankfully, I didn't, but I entered the room, yelling at her to not eat anything. But she had eaten most of everything, including the seafood I had ordered. William. Shit, I'm so sorry, honey. I didn't realize I ordered fish. Where's your EpiPen? I looked around frantically, everywhere, anywhere. And she looked up at me. Erica, what do you mean? I feel fine. It's been like 10 minutes. I feel fine. Really? William, what? What do you mean? I went up to her and looked at her. She did seem totally fine. The fish somehow hadn't affected her like it did back when we were younger. She had to go to the hospital for practically a week, needed help breathing and everything. I stayed in the room for another 5 minutes with her to make sure she was fine. I had the EpiPen ready just in case. I don't know what was worse. The feeling that she was going to react at any point, or that she just continued eating. Chapter 2, Experiences. April 28th. I was downstairs texting Tom again. Even he was baffled. He was aware of her allergy. It says online that in a few rare cases, allergies can leave the body, or with a lot of treatments and pills. Not the ones my wife had gotten, and she hadn't left the house. Hell, she had left the bed since she came back from the hospital. I was officially concerned about everything. I thought this would have gone away after yesterday, but after the fish incident, I'm not sure what to think, and I'm on high alert on everything. She asked me at first to get more seafood. She wanted to try it. I was reluctant at first, but eventually agreed. Maybe this was her way to actually get better. A very small part of me thought it would have been over after a few more days. I cooked up some of the salmon I bought and brought it up with her pills and some water. She barely waited for me to put the plate down and started eating. I thought she was about to bite into my hand. I was startled a bit, but I quickly put the pills to the desk with the water. William, don't forget to take your pills. Erica, right? Yeah, my pills. I walked back downstairs. I had the EpiPen ready next to the drawer next to our bed, just in case. But I never needed it. I admit I crashed down onto the couch and fell asleep. All the sudden energy from last night with my sudden panic about what I let her eat boosted me up, and well, now it finally got to me. I'm not sure what had happened, but when I woke up to an awful chewing sound, crunching and chewing. It was night. I had slept for maybe 10 to 12 hours straight. I got up and walked to the kitchen. I turned on the light, seeing my wife eating the rest of the salmon that I had bought, except I hadn't cooked that one yet. Raw fish isn't exactly bad for you, sushi and such, but seeing it just in action, it felt haunting. This was the first time since that day that I had seen her out of bed. I was a bit relieved but afraid to approach her. She looked up at me, chewing. God, I hated that noise. The disgusting gooey noises it made, the wild sadistic tearing of meat and other materials through her teeth. Erica, sorry. I figured you fell asleep. I just got so hungry. I didn't want to bother you. I saw you on the couch and decided to get something. William, it's fine. How are you feeling? Erica, mostly hungry, but hey, I'm working on it. Sorry for making you overwork and everything. William, don't worry about it. It's just about making you feel better. I'm glad I can help. I forced a smile on my face. I'm not sure why. Why didn't I just smile? I was happy to make sure she was healthy. Erica, I'll stay here for a bit, grab a few more things if that's okay. William, maybe actually you could comment with the eating? I'm spending a lot of money to give you so much food in so little time. I understand you can be hungry, but this isn't normal. Erica, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm just in a hungry mood. I need food. William, then I'm taking it out of your account. I can't spend all this money on just food. Try to eat less too. I walked upstairs into our room a bit pissed. Before I started my ascend, I heard clicking from the kitchen. I looked back to see my wife, still eating. I brushed it off thinking it was just background noises and went up to our room. I expected it to be filthy, full of trash, when I entered though. The room was clean, only the best was filthy, and the room smelled like if you walked through an alley of dead animals. Where did all of the boxes ordered and bags gone to? I started taking off the sheets and put them in the washer. I used some Febreze to cover up the awful smell. I don't know how she lived in this room for 4 days now. Just eating. As always, whilst waiting, I texted Tom, telling him about everything that had happened up until now. This time though, I actually called him. I needed to hear someone's voice, anything but the disgusting damn chewing and crunching I heard for the past days. William, He-Man. Sorry for suddenly calling, I'm not doing too good. Tom, no worries, man. It's completely understandable. A lot of weird shit is happening on your end. How is she, by the way? William, I don't know. She seems physically and mentally fine, just eating so much. She took out the trash. She can get out of bed, just doesn't. The doctor told us to give it 3 weeks, but I kind of want to bring her back sooner. Tom, I'd say to call them, let them know what's going on, that you're worried for her and, well, from what you told me, you spent a lot of money and have not been earning much. How much longer can this go on? William, yeah, no, you're right. I'll call them, get an appointment, get this whole thing fixed, and now one more thing. Tom, what's up? William, I need a camera, like a nanny cam or something. April 30. My friend Tom got me a camera to set up inside my house in the living room and in my bedroom. From time to time, I'd check to see my wife chomping down on the next food I had gotten for her. I didn't watch any longer than that. Reminds me that I tried getting her to the hospital today so that Tom could set up the cameras. She did not want to leave the house. The doctor had to come over on his day off. I apologized to him. He went to check out my wife, and he had somehow brought Erica outside long enough so that Tom could set them up. Afterwards, the doctor told me that she wasn't eating properly. She was losing weight. I chuckled sarcastically. William, are you fucking serious? All she's been doing is eating. I'm down $500 in food only for her, and you're telling me that she has not been gaining weight? Doctor, something she might be doing, not actually eating, maybe, or exercising when you sleep. The best thing you can do is keep helping her, make sure she eats. William, she's in bed all day. She watches TV shows about cooking, for God's sake. We talked for another 10 minutes. I had denied that Erica wasn't eating. She was eating. I know she was. My wife didn't exercise. She watched what she ate. She didn't eat too much or too little. She had a good metabolism. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. That night I even checked my suspicions. I had spent way more than $500. I had to stop spending so much, from whoever's account. This was an absurd amount of money to spend on food for 1 week. May 1st. She's eating again. I don't know what she was eating. Her hands were covered in a substance, but it was meat that I could smell, either expired or something else. I went to bed at around 8 p.m. last night. I slept on the couch. I thought I'd check the cameras, see what they picked up. I checked the live feed of her eating like she was a king, had food everywhere, like I hadn't even cleaned the sheets. I had ordered her a few things again, not knowing what she had eaten yesterday. Kind of freaked me out. I made sure to order extra. I had made some breakfast for myself before doing so. I looked at my eggs and pushed the plate away. I couldn't bear the thought of eating. I reviewed the footage. Christ, I was almost thankful I hadn't eaten my eggs. I would have thrown them up right after. At 9 p.m., she had gotten up from the bed, walked downstairs to me sleeping on the couch, and she just stared at me from the stairs. I sped up the footage, stared at me for 2 hours straight, not moving an inch. Her eyes darting me through the dark. After exactly 2 hours and 13 minutes, she suddenly moved to the kitchen. I couldn't see anything. I should have thought about putting one there, but I could see a tiny bit into the kitchen. She was looking through the fridge, anywhere that could have food. She couldn't find much, canned food and such. Midnight, she was done with most of everything. Sauces were left, condiments, powdered products like soup and spices. A few minutes passed by of her gathering all of it. She couldn't possibly, right? As I thought, she couldn't do what I thought she was going to do. She did exactly that. She opened the lids and packets of all of them and chugged them. I couldn't see her face, but I could see her chest and her arms. I knew what she was doing. I closed the laptop immediately. I could hear the loud and horrifying gulps that were thudding inside her throat. I choked a bit, gagging. It took me a good hour to recover from what I had just seen and heard, but even then I was disturbed. I'll never forget it. I sent the footage to Tom. I wasn't crazy, and I needed someone to know what was happening to my wife, and I had to know what my wife was doing to herself, hopefully seeing why she was doing this. I took a breath and continued watching this cursed footage of a woman seeming like she was poisoning herself. From 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., she drank and ate cleaning products, charcoal, strong alcohol like it was nothing. The cooler that I had brought for the party, I hadn't emptied it, she did. Ate all the food in it, drank all the beers, alcohol, and even ate the weed I was going to bring. She didn't smoke it, she ate it. She desperately looked around for more things to eat. She went back upstairs. I switched cameras to saw her eating the bags that once held the food she ate. That's how she was getting rid of the boxes and bags. She wasn't taking the trash out. She was eating them. Plastic, cardboard boxes, paper. I could feel my heart race, pumping faster. I was panicking. What happened to No? What is wrong with her? After her feast, she stopped and looked down at the floor in a weird way, and I realized after a bit she was staring at me. Not at the camera, but me downstairs. She knew where I was. She knew exactly where I was at that moment. I knew she had watched me, but the sight of it felt like a hunter stalking its prey. I closed the laptop once again. I didn't want to know what the hell was upstairs pretending to be my wife, pretending to be human. I could feel every hair on my body standing. I was on edge. I was scared, afraid. Every and any question was popping into my head, sending me into this crisis. I had to get a grip. I had to know this was real. I rubbed my hand with my fingers, feeling everything around me, my smells, my mouth, my touch. I started panicking even more, but then I saw a picture on our wall. Upon seeing it, I remembered a lot about my wife, everything that we've lived together, when I met her parents, how nervous I was. When I asked her to marry me, I breathed out like I hadn't sucked out air in forever. The relief, but then the sudden realization hit me even harder after. This was real, this is happening. I had to keep ordering food for it. Keep it at bay. Keep it here. Chapter 3. The Monster in My House. May 3rd. I went out yesterday. After all of that, I took an extra day, spoke with Tom about the situation. He told me to potentially get out of the house for a few days, in which I agreed. I didn't take anything with me. I took my phone, wallet, and keys and left the house. I went to my parents. I explained that I needed a break from Erica. I didn't tell them exactly what was going on, but I told them that I needed to see them. I can connect the cameras to my phone. I was afraid to check, but inside me I needed to. How far would this go? She could actually take this. After forcing myself to eat what my mother had made me, it wasn't bad. But thinking of eating only made me think of what I had seen my wife do to herself. I had a lot of water to force everything down my stomach. I looked at my phone and opened the surveillance app and looked. I almost dropped my phone on the floor. My face went white, my whole body froze. She was on the couch eating the fabric, tearing through the leather on the covers, the cotton inside. I could see the kitchen, and it was ravaged. Everything was open, glass was shattered, the doors of the cabinets almost broken off their hinges. William, what the fuck? I whispered out, trying to cover my words. Mom, what's wrong, dear? I spaced out. I didn't even realize my mother was standing near me. I looked up at her, hiding my phone. William, nothing. Mom, sorry. Just Tom sending me a stupid photo. Mom, oh, I see. Are you all right? You look tense. Do you want some iced tea? William, yeah, I'm fine. My job is just a tad stressful. Nothing I can't handle, I promise. But no thanks. I have to get going. I once again forced a smile on my face. I hated it. My own mother. I couldn't tell her what was going on. How could she understand? The video seems like enough evidence yet. No, I couldn't bring her into it. I had to take care of myself. Whatever that meant. I left the morning after, telling them thank you for taking care of me, but I had to talk this out with Erica, of course lying. I went to someone, hoping maybe someone had some answers, her brother. I asked him what had happened to their family, seeing if anything could relate to my current problem. Erica never talked about them. I only met them when I was younger, and they had died a few years before I married her. He was a bit hesitant at first, but he told me he didn't know much about what had happened either. Ray, I wish I could tell you, but the cops only said that they disappeared, or missing, and to not hold out hope. Me and Erica just accepted it. Not much we could have done. Their house was emptied out. Nothing from the past or from now was found. William, nothing was found? Ray, not a single object. It looked like an empty box, like a newly constructed house. William, something wrong is going on with your sister, and I don't know what to do. I thought you might know what was happening. Ray, wait, what? What do you mean? What's going on? I thought about explaining, but even I had trouble believing me in my own words. So I showed Ray the footage, and he was taken aback. He was horrified, but he looked like it didn't affect him as much as it affected me. Ray, our dad texted us too, saying that our mom would not stop eating whatever she got her hands on. He didn't have video, but we never believed him, or we thought he was talking crazy. We didn't think God. William, what do I do? What can I do for her? Ray, I'm not sure. This isn't normal. Can anyone even do this? Can anyone come out of this alive after ingesting all of that shit? Is it even Erica anymore? I thought about it, how it could even be real. How could it even be her anymore? She had drunk cleaning products and looked as healthy as ever. That's not human, not anymore at least. William, what do I do? I can't just leave her there. What if she eventually leaves the house? She's already tearing up the furniture. Ray, I don't know, but if that thing was also responsible for my parents' death and now somehow is infecting Erica, the best thing to do would be to try and kill it. I hated to say it, thinking it could still be my wife, but I agreed this creature needed to be put down. It needed to be killed. I left the house, not wanting Ray to be a part of this. I took my car and left to a gun shop. I didn't own a gun, but I had a license. Never thought I would have had to use one, especially the person I loved the most in life. I got a Glock 17, nothing too fancy, something quick. I headed home. I wondered what went wrong, what had happened to us, and what caused this. So many questions, and yet so little to no answers. I didn't even know if that thing eating my couch was my wife anymore, if it was even, I don't know what it was, and it insulted me by mimicking my wife, our memories together. I arrived at my driveway, and immediately knew something was wrong. I walked up to my door, and it was gone. I already had my weapon ready for whatever was waiting for me. I walked inside on edge. I aimed at every little noise or movement my ears and eyes could catch. I was nervous and scared. I didn't know if I had what it took to do it. The living room was cleaned out. And I don't mean the room was cleaned. It was empty, completely empty. Had she eaten everything? I walked into the kitchen. Same thing, all the cupboards were empty. The microwave had no more door. Everything that wasn't nailed down or could be removed easily was gone. I went upstairs, same thing. My bedroom was cleaned out. Not a single crumb of whatever that thing considered food was left. I think it didn't eat the house because it would have raised even more suspicions. The house looked like no one had ever lived here. Portraits, clocks, furniture, and the newly placed cameras too. Nothing. And the worst part, she wasn't there either. I ran outside in the backyard, and I heard the neighbor's kid screaming. I turned to look, seeing something that resembled my wife on all fours, biting down on the kid's arm, having it fully inside of her mouth, like it had no throat to cough on. Just a mouth. The thing looked like my wife, but its teeth had been broken, making them sharp. Its eyes were wide, like they hadn't slept. Its torso was mostly bones, at least of what I could see. It was dirty, dark, and expulsed by the most awful smell of rotting meat, waste. It itself was dead, yet it needed to eat. I was horrified, but I mustered the words, screaming at it. William, let go of her. I shot at its leg and the bullet hit it, but it didn't puncture its skin. The bullet didn't go through. It just stopped, slowly being dragged inside of its body like it was eating it. This gun was useless. I put the gun back in my pants, and I ran over and hopped the fence, grabbed a wooden bat that was on the ground and grabbed it. I played a bit when I was younger. Let's say my swing was brutal. I swung at the thing's face, and it clunked, hitting full force, even breaking the bat. All three of us fell down. It let go of the girl's arm, and she ran off into her house calling out for her parents. I didn't really want to or have the time to think about why that had worked. I took the rest of the bat and plunged it into the chest of the thing. It screeched this unholy scream and kicked me off of it, absorbing the rest of the bat into its stomach. It sent me crashing into the fence, and I blacked out for a few minutes, and that's all it needed. I came back to the creature being gone, and the door of the house was gone. I stood up and went inside of the neighbor's house. It had been cleaned out or eaten out. William, God damn it. No. I crumbled to my knees knowing what it had done. I was about to give up until I heard that loud, disgusting clanking of teeth, tearing through material, gnawing into its stomach. It hadn't left the house. The noise it made, it never left me. I knew it was that monster, but what else could I try? Bullets didn't work, melee weapons either, but maybe like any other wild animal, any other savage beast. I stood up and ran to my car and opened the trunk, grabbing a fuel canister. I had it in an emergency just in case. We ran out of gas on the highway one day on vacation, and I made sure to always pack an extra in case. She always made fun of me by packing extra, just to be careful. I closed the trunk hard, staring at the gas can. I only had one way to light it. Chapter 4. My wife was eaten. I entered my neighbor's house and poured gas on every entrance, windows, every possible exit so it couldn't get out. But before I could reach outside, its long, disgusting hand grabbed me. Its fingers felt like knives slowly slicing into my skin. It threw me back inside into the wall. I looked up at it, and before I could take out my weapon, it pinned my left hand into the wall with its sharp finger. I squealed in pain and looked up at this greed creature. I still didn't understand. Why, how these hundreds of questions, these thoughts rushing into my head, were suddenly silenced by my own voice as I spoke to it. William, what are you? What are you? Why were you pretending to be her? I know you're not her. I heard it quickly, gasping and wheezing. It was laughing at me like the answer was obvious. I felt fear and rage growing inside of me. But it opened its mouth slowly in an unworldly way. In all directions its mouth started growing, expanding. I was looking at an abyss that I was going to become a part of it. Then the little girl suddenly stabbed the creature at the top of the head. I could see a sharp, broken piece of wood sticking through inside its mouth. It yelped out and backed away. Looking at the girl, it screeched, shouting so loud it roared through the entire house, shattering the windows. In that quick instance, that sharp pain in my hand I felt when it nudged its claw out gave me the adrenaline rush, and I took out the gun from my pants and shot at the ground, igniting the fuel, and the thing turned its head back at me. I was somehow able to move out of the way. I ran for the kid and jumped out of the window. It hurt a bit, but nothing to what I had been through for the last week. I kept her safe, and so did her parents before dying of that monster. I told her to leave. I told her to get as far away. Anywhere but here. William, get out of here, kid. Go. Get somewhere safe. She took off, running on the sidewalk away from the house that had caught fire. I could hear it inside, screaming, trying to get out. I turned around and walked away, hoping it was over. But the thing is smarter than I believed. It jumped out of the second-floor window and crashed onto me. It was burnt, revealing its actual body. It was horrifying. I can't give much detail, but this thing, it spoke. I couldn't understand a thing. It spoke in tongues or another language. It kept me inside the house, knowing I wouldn't get out now. I had accepted my fate. It'll burn. It'll burn with it, but I had to try something. Couldn't let my life go out in vain. I could see inside its body through its mouth, like I saw before, a complete abyss. Nothing of light could be coming from deep inside of this bottomless pit. It grabbed me and I couldn't move whilst it forced me down its mouth. I probably bled out inside its stomach. The police and firefighters soon arrived. They had found the little girl and started putting out the fire. The house was finished, but not like there was anything worth it there. The thing was gone. There was nothing, no one but an empty, burnt house. The police kept both houses on lockdown and even evacuated the neighborhood. Everyone there was asked to stay with family or friends. A few days into the investigation, they had apparently even found a few blood spots in the forest near William's house, all identified to be animals. They had also found half-eaten carcasses of raccoons, cats, dogs, whatever else you could find outside, even a deer. She was probably caught in the action. A few months had gone by, and nothing had happened more. Everyone was moved back into their house. A missing case was closed for William and Erica, of course to no avail. The case went cold. And 2 years later, still nothing. The house was rebuilt. New people have been moved into the houses. And I don't know if William is dead. I'm hoping. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm hoping for his sake that he is. God, please let him be dead. I don't want to know if he is. I think the thought of this story having its own ending, my ending, I guess I'm going to find out what happened to him soon anyway. It's been 2 years since this happened to my best friend, William. I've been the one writing this story. I've read his texts and reviewed his footage multiple times, police reports, and everything else that was given to me that I was able to access legally. I've also talked to Ray, Erica's brother, the little girl that survived, and the investigators that were on the case. My name is Tom Drumming, and I'm writing about what happened to my friend, William, because yesterday morning, my wife went to the hospital, and today I saw her on the toilet, and she's been there for almost an hour now. I can hear her vomiting. 3 years. It has been 3 years since that incident. 3 years since I put myself out there and got into the dating field. Despite it being years since I met her, I hear her voice any time I'm alone, and I often felt her touch on my skin whenever I laid restless in bed. Not a day would go by without me reflecting on the past, which I agree is unhealthy, but it was a force of habit. I feel that I owe you all an explanation. I used to work for a fast food joint as a cashier. It was a thankless job with many an irritable customer you could imagine. Or I would sometimes get tasked with cleaning the restrooms, and believe me, anyone would be driven mad once they see what horrors were left in there. I was an ordinary man working a 9-to-5 job and lived all by my lonesome in an aging apartment, but I would have had it no other way. I was never a sucker for romance or dating. But there laid the problem. Ever since graduation, my former classmates have settled down and married and filled their social media accounts with photos of their children, or they had achieved the American dream and became successes. As I had already alluded to, that never bothered me that I was a bachelor with no real responsibilities or hang-ups. However, that would change when my younger brother got married. Richie was the apple of my mother's, I being the favorite of the family for good reason. He was tall, athletic, academically competent. I hadn't seen him in years, but from what I heard, he met a beautiful woman during a trip and they hit it off well. They wasted little time with announcing their engagement, and believe me, it was a large event with over 100 people coming to attend the holy matrimony. I should have been happy for my brother, since he deserved the world and much, much more. But that only proved to be a temporary distraction, as my mother became more and more obsessed with my single life. It started during the after party, which should have been directed towards Richie and his wife. But instead, my mother came along and nonchalantly put me on the spot by asking me about my future plans. When I told her, she kept probing and probing out of dissatisfaction at my answer. I tried to keep cool, but my buttons were eventually pushed, and we ended up disrupting the ceremony. I hadn't spoken to my brother since. Ever since then, my mother would call or text me every day badgering me on when I would consider dating. It became even more burdensome when my brother announced that he and his wife would be having a child soon. Day in and day out. One of the only forms of discussion we ever shared was my mother asking when I was going to get married, because she wanted grandkids, now to which I would also snarkily respond with, "And I'm working on it." It would all reach its zenith one rainy day. After an especially grueling day of work, of which I won't elaborate much beyond saying that it involved some rugrats and their overbearing mother, I was to leave for the day when I received a text message from none other than my mother. I groaned to myself and entered my password into my phone and saw a picture of Mom with my brother Richie and his wife. It was some days after the birth of his son. Underneath that was a sentence which said, "You know that life is short, dear. I hope that you settle down soon. Can't let your mother wait forever." I wanted to scream. This was the tactic that she always used against me. The old, "I brought you into this world" excuse. I was supposed to be eternally grateful that my mother gave birth to me, which I was, but that was indicative of her conditional love. She raised me and nurtured me all for the purpose of me one day returning the favor and blessing her with some bundles of joy. I never understood that mentality in the slightest. Since when was it ever written into stone that, "Thou shalt give your parents grandchildren"? And why was it considered an ungrateful gesture to choose against bringing another life into the world, when there are so many other kids out there that would be better suited to be adopted or loved? Perhaps it had to do with establishing a legacy, but Richie's son already filled that role for her. So why was I not let off the hook? Just maddening. I crammed my phone back into my pocket and groaned. It was apparently loud enough that it alerted one of my coworkers. When they asked me what the matter was, I explained everything to them, from my mother's insistence that I hook up and how I never was interested in it. He told me of a speed date event that was happening at the town's auditorium and that I should give it a shot. Naturally, I declined to go at first, but he was much like my mother with being persistent. When he said that his cousin would be attending, I felt it was enough to ease me into it, since I had known his cousin for some time. I sighed in defeat and took a flyer for the dating game. It wasn't like I had much planned for the rest of the week anyway, I thought, but it was nevertheless a chore to go to one. If I was lucky, I could snag a few drinks before going home, and if push comes to shove, I could always tell a white lie about meeting a significant other, and my mother wouldn't be the wiser. Not bothering much on my attire, I wore a plain dress shirt and khakis. The moment I opened the door to the auditorium, my nose was assaulted by a cocktail of different scents of high-class whiskey and expensive perfumes that made me nearly cough up a lung. I could tell some of the attendees were bursting with confidence, with women casually chatting with men in their low-cut dresses and prim and proper aesthetics. For what it was worth, my coworker's cousin was there, and she seemed just as indifferent about it as I was. She was a brunette with a small stature. She wore a green dress that was not as revealing as the other women's dresses, and she had thin-framed glasses over her eyes. We talked for a while and took jabs at how stupid the whole occasion was, but how we were convinced into it for different reasons. As the time for the speed dating approached, we went our separate ways to mingle with the others. If I had foreseen where everything would go after this point, I would have decided to leave the dating game with her. The buzzer sprang to life, and I regrettably shuffled to the first table. The first woman was a 22-year-old mother of 3, which was admittedly a turn-off on its own. Dating was one thing, but doing so with the knowledge that she'd have to juggle with taking care of her kids was too much for me. The woman explained to me how she had been on different drugs when she was younger, such as methamphetamine, but she had been sober for a while, which was at the least good news to hear. However, I ended up turning her down, and she seemed to take it well. Hopefully she could get her issues resolved and find someone deserving of her. The next woman was about 10 years older with white hair, and she mentioned having grandchildren. Much like before, it was something that I did not want to deal with this time, a new generation of children. She was an exceptionally kind senior citizen, but she did get the hint that I wasn't interested in giving the relationship a try. She also was a little hard at hearing the timer went off, but she stayed in the chair for a few more seconds until I gave her directions. The next table was empty, so I didn't even bother going to that one. There was one lady around my age that I did consider, but I did not have my phone on me at the time, so it wasn't like I could have asked for her number. Besides, she was more confident than I could attest to, and she'd probably prefer someone who was just like her in that mentality, rather than some cynical man. I would have called it a day then and there, but then she caught my attention. There was something about her that felt ethereal, celestial even. She had long, flowing black hair, vibrant, green eyes that sparkled like emeralds, a curvaceous body and plentiful bosom. Her skin was without blemish, reminding me of those porcelain dolls I had seen in the window of antique stores. She wore all black, but that only made her more alluring. She spoke in a bubbly, flirtatious tone. For some indiscernible reason, I became hooked on her words, as if they held me captive and burrowed into my brain. At that time, I thought she was the idyllic woman. It is hard for me to remember all we talked about because, if I am being honest, she was doing the most talking with her, stretching words out intentionally as she whispered sweet nothings into my ears. Who she was no one could tell. Not once did she ever let slip where she came from, nor her family life. What she did tell me, however, was that she was a graduate of an all-girls university, and how she studied dreams ranging from what causes them and what they represent. More and more she ate away at my time until I couldn't help but find myself falling ever so deeper for her. I knew that none of it made any sense, and that there had to be some sinister designs behind those irresistible green orbs of hers. But it was like an invisible set of hands was forcing me to continue gawking her. Even turning away once sent a dull pain through my head. She had that intoxicating giggle of hers that complemented her playful behavior. I had nearly forgotten the timer as it buzzed, but I was already convinced I had picked my choice. Since she was new to the neighborhood, I took it upon myself to show her around. We both went to a bar and sat at the counter and casually spoke to each other as the bartender served us. She told me things, many things. She lectured me on the physical world, using such jargon language I could not understand, and yet she was very elaborate and confident in what she had to say. She spoke of interdimensional travel and the odd alien shapes that made up the fabric of our reality, and how time as we knew it was an illusion. My brain throbbed as I tried to catalog all that I was told. My recollection of that night continued to escape me. It must have been an eternity since we were together, because I next found myself back home, my brain boiling from everything that happened. I was awake for hours up until I felt the urge to sleep tugging at my eyelids. Even in the recesses of my mind, the woman appeared in my dreams. During one of the most bizarre, I found my soul projected from my body at the flicking of her fingers, and she revealed the astral plane to me. Everything she said was not without truth. Structures of immeasurable size and shape were constructed with ever more bizarre shapes not known to this world and extraterrestrial metal. Yet still there were these anomalies, living creatures resembling the earth and sea stars and amorphous bodiless cells the size of a man. The woman danced with these inhuman abominations, bereft of clothing and chanting odd, alien languages. Before a large black cauldron, a knife manifested in the inky blackness of the air, and she roasted it underneath the fire that lit the furnace. The blade glowed from the intense heat, and when I realized what she was about to do, I tried to look away, but something kept me from turning my head in disgust. The woman held her arm over the boiling pot and tediously carved the hot tip into her forearm and went down. The scent of her iron-rich blood wafted in my nostrils as I watched beads of crimson fall into the frothing mix. The screeching grew a few more octaves, becoming increasingly blasphemous. I then awoke with a sweat, finding that I was back in my body, but my very soul was tainted. I could not decipher if it was merely a nightmare or if it was real. I could still smell the scent of burning flesh and hear the thunderous chants of worship in my ears. As the chance to sleep was ripped away from me, I decided to pass the time by watching television. Remote in hand, I pressed the button to activate the device and flipped through a few channels with disinterest. The static buzzed as pictures started to flicker on screen. For whatever reason, I stopped on one channel. It was detailing an old forensic case that happened a year or two ago. The case, nevertheless, felt just as recent. They were a family known as the Denvers. The family patriarch, called Denver, was once a very active member of the community, running charities for disaster relief and applying for the role of alderman a few times during the town's elections. He was a graduate of a community college east of town and worked at a factory for 6 years. A single father, Kyle would raise his elder son Neil and his baby boy Frederick, both 10 and 2 months old respectively. Everyone was shocked by the sudden deaths, but the police deemed it as a murder-suicide. Apparently, Kyle was not as stable as he was letting on, or that was the running theory. What is known about Kyle is that he had met a young woman a few months ago who seemed perfect in every way. But then something odd happened. Kyle would gradually leave home less and less, with him slowly abandoning the charities and town work until one day he stopped altogether. His extended family became aware of this, but any time they would come over, it would be that female answering, or he would only speak through the door. Witnesses reported on hearing him mutter things under his breath, but could never fully dissect what he was trying to say. When the authorities found his body, he was in the hallway with mad ramblings scrawled on the walls. In the room adjacent, they found Neil with a bag around his head, wound so tightly, the strings dug into the skin of his neck. Little Frederick was found smothered in his sleep in his crib. The authorities were first alerted when Neil's teachers reported on his unusual disappearance. After breaking into the home, the police were met with the body of Kyle having been burnt to a crisp. Around the area were continuous scribblings, some starting off articulate before devolving the further. Kyle's mind broke. His girlfriend was never found. While they browsed the house for possible motivations, the fact the house was completely wrecked was made apparent, with holes smashed into the floors and clothes scattered astray throughout the pigsty. In his bedroom, they uncovered his writings and were horrified. This woman, if you can call her that, devastated my life. For countless nights and months she has told me things, whispered maddening things into my ears. I still hear her voice in my head, violating my thoughts, tainting my very soul. Beneath her attributes belies the blackest and most putrid of souls, and the only thing I can recommend is that she die. Do not leave her corpse behind. I have failed once. Cremate the body. Scatter the ashes to the farthest regions of the world. Do not allow for this wicked woman to live. With the running theory that Kyle went mad and killed his sons before himself, the case was considered closed. Kyle's family, however, that it wasn't like him to do such a thing. But with no sign of his girlfriend's whereabouts, there were no other potential suspects. I watched the program for the remainder of my night, and I headed to my room at 5 a.m. When I woke up, I saw my speed date standing over me. Odd. I did not recall letting her in. Every part of me urged me to run or alert someone, but I was captured by her emerald eyes and long, raven hair. Before I could say anything, those spidery words of hers reeled me in again. Something about her voice was so inhuman, but soothing at the same time. As we headed out the door, I couldn't shake the memory of my nightmare away. It all felt so real. The more I mused on the oddity, a cold hypothesis came to mind. Did she teleport into my house? And before I even knew it, I was attending more dates with the black-haired siren, and I sank further to her charms. That intoxicating giggle of hers never failed to excite me. Oftentimes, whenever we were out, she would rub up against me, giving me full access to her body. Days went by, then weeks. I was putty in her hands. I found myself sharing my deepest, darkest secrets with her because she felt comfortable to vent to. Perhaps that was the real reason I was always indifferent with dating in the past. That I have been through things where I chose to be distant from people out of the belief that I would be hurt by it. Months went by, and it was the most magical experience I ever had. About 7 months later, I decided to pop the question to my girlfriend. Unsurprisingly, she said yes and practically jumped into my arms. With that, I felt relieved I would no longer hear my mother badger me about settling down. After she had frequently made unanticipated visits to my apartment, I allowed her to move in with me. Had I known ahead of time just how poor of a decision that was, I would have ended things then and there. I don't know when it started, but I started to grow disinterested in leaving home. For her part, my fiancée would lounge around the house reading and doing slight provocations to catch my attention. Not that she really had to do anything after all. She was beautiful. All I could ever need or want was her. And so, that was what happened. I drifted apart from my job as I became more of a recluse. My rent started to become due, but even then, I couldn't shake the urge to stay home. Day after day, I neglected to do the basic necessities like keeping my apartment clean as used clothes began to pile up and dirted in massive heaps. Food was becoming increasingly scarce, but I never once felt hunger pangs. Soon enough, I neglected the necessity of bathing as I further became enraptured by the emerald globes. My dreams remained the same ever since she moved in. Dreams of my spirit exiting my body and being whisked to other planets, and the vast ritualistic sacrifices the woman participated in kept me awake for long periods of time. More chanting in unearthly tongues and mind-melting abnormalities became my reality with every waking second. A few months went by and my family started to get worried. In fact, after the huge disaster that was my brother's after-party, he was called by my mother to check on me. However, I couldn't even hope to meet him in my current state. The smell of my apartment was rancid with the smell of decaying food and rotting clothes. My vision became blurry the more I fixated on my girlfriend. Richie tried to break the door down, but he told me later that some disembodied, supernatural force prevented him from smashing the door. I heard him shout that he would come back, but a part of me wished that he would not bother. My girlfriend continued to erode my mind. I was forgetting everything, even my own name. Every night, she would lean over my bed and whisper in my ear. Her voice, once something that filled me with so much joy, was replaced with dread as she told me of the throne of Azathoth existing in the center of time and space, the very center of chaos, and how demonic gods played on chaotic drums and flutes as they revolved around the mighty throne of the ultimate chaos. She ripped my soul from my body and forced it to traverse the universe, sometimes swapping it with that of a Shoggoth. My brother and the coworker who introduced me to the speed dating event met up at a restaurant one day to discuss their concerns in regard to me. Anytime the coworker would come over to my apartment, I would always be preoccupied, or my girlfriend would answer the door in my stead. The nauseating fumes of the decaying materials wafted seeped through the door of my apartment with it, becoming such a concern that the landlord was contemplating calling the police to force me out of my empire of rot. Richie himself couldn't comprehend how some woman could have such an influence over me, and turns out he was asking all the right questions. A thin, aging man with a receding hairline intruded on their conversation the moment he heard Richie mention my girlfriend's dark hair and green eyes. Turns out he was well aware of her. However, my brother had to buy him a drink so he could wet his lips. Years ago, his brother met an exceptionally beautiful young dame with a bubbly attitude and pure complexion when he was assigned to demolish an old building. Despite the fact that dogs growled in her presence, his brother was deeply in love with her, but even he could not explain why. The man scoffed as he wrapped his lips around the mouth of the wine bottle. To be frank, the woman herself was truthfully average looking as far as he was concerned. Regardless, his sibling was head over heels for the girl, and the two dated for months. During that time, his relationship would end up cutting into his occupation, and after several failed attempts to notify him of the consequences, he was fired. He couldn't care less because that meant that he could spend more time with the woman he deluded himself into loving. The aging man stopped for a moment, his words becoming harsher as he choked up with grief. Everything went to hell. His brother sent him messages discussing how his date was truly not of this mortal plane, and how she would whisper into his ears, driving him ever so mad, and ranted about her perverting his soul and sending it to hellish realms, all without his consent. The once beautiful woman destroyed his very will, and by the time he became aware of what was going on, it was too late. He would be found in his bathroom, hanged. Soon after he finished, another man spoke up. He relayed a story about a family friend who also met a raven-haired beauty with green gems, and how she encroached on his married life. Like with the elder's story, the woman enticed him and slowly ingratiated herself. His wife and children tried their best to get the control off him, but the story ended tragically. His wife and 4 children were found with gunshot wounds to the cranium, and the husband slashed his throat and was found over the kitchen sink. Like before, the woman was never found. Yet still there came more and more reports on this insidious individual with some spanning back years. Each encounter had a sinister pattern. She would meet a man, seduce them, drive them bats-hit insane, and they would then kill their entire families and themselves. The same was true if the man was a bachelor. It was there that the Denver's family massacre made much more sense. Poor Kyle met a beautiful woman who charmed him only for him to meet the fate of so many others. Richie, more boldened, tried to save me from that tragic end. It got to the point where I was unable to perceive of time as days blurred together. That once enticing giggle of my girlfriend now pierced my ears, sounding like a garbled cackle of a witch. Her comforting touch transitioned to a slimy, grotesque assault. Instead of the gorgeous girl I thought I knew, I was instead looking pure evil in the face. Against my will, my astral spirit was forced to accompany her to different planes of existence and watch her perform abominable rituals with those starfish anomalies. I have seen things no man of sound mind should ever be made to bear witness to. So much blood and secret parties. I was at the end of the line. My very being was abused by my girlfriend, with my thoughts becoming hostile. Filth clung onto my skin from the little scraps of food I had to sustain myself with. My mirror was so filled with muck and other substances, I could not see myself. I considered it a good thing, to be honest. I'd rather have been ignorant than be forced to come to the realization that I allowed my girlfriend to go that far. I knew that she was preparing to kill me at any second, but when, I could not know. All I did know was that I had to do something, and quick. While my girlfriend casually read one of her unholy books, I grabbed a knife from my dirty counter and wielded it as if it were my lifeline. She must have anticipated this because she moved at a fast pace, or perhaps I had become so emaciated I was losing speed. That giggle again. That goddamn cackle that held a tight grip over my brain like a fly trapped in a spider's web. She mocked my efforts, telling me how weak-willed and pathetic I was. Her sharp, harsh words were like the knife stabbing into my confidence. My girlfriend grabbed the knife and tapped the blade with her fingers. "Do you really think this knife has any effect on me?" As she said that, what she did next startled me. Without much reaction and her cold, green eyes staring at me with intent, she methodically sliced her fingers with the blade. I tried to get her to stop, but she continued sawing and cutting and severing her appendages until they fell to the floor. That in itself, while shocking, was not as horrifying as her blood. I would have thought that, despite everything, she would bleed as other people did. But instead of the iron, rusted smell I was accustomed to, my girlfriend's blood possessed a yellow tinge, and her index ring and pinky wriggled in the puddle of pooling blood like a living creature. The blood smelled unearthly abhorrent and made me nauseous. From the bloodied stumps, there emerged small heads resembling my girlfriend's. They resembled finger puppets, but even finger puppets would not be as lifelike. My girlfriend stared at me with amusement at my reaction and flexed her fingers as her smaller selves giggled in that same shrill cackle. I backed away from my girlfriend as she came closer with the knife. I tried to fight it with all my might, believe me I had. I pushed and I kicked and I swung punches, but it was all uselessly for naught. This entity held got me good. The last thing I could remember was being handed the knife and a loud banging on my door before darkness. I awoke in the hospital, my coworker and Richie by my side. Looking down, I saw that I had a stab wound on my chest. Somehow, perhaps through the remaining willpower I had left, I narrowly avoided piercing my heart. I looked at Richie with confusion, and as I tried to explain what had happened to me, he responded with a warm embrace. I did not know if some force protected me during that time, or if it was not my time to die. Regardless, with my girlfriend now a thing of the past, I slowly was able to rebuild my former life. I cleaned up my apartment and reapplied to my job at the fast food joint. My relationship with my mother improved after she profusely apologized for what happened to me. My girlfriend was never seen again. The only thing the authorities found of her were her fingers and the suffocating, noxious fumes they were wallowing around in. Even then, I still feel she never actually left. I can still sometimes see her in my dreams and feel the alienating touch of her hands. I can never truly forget how she blackened my soul. Last night, I saw the face of the devil. My girlfriend and I were driving home from my grandfather's funeral 2 states over. The GPS gave us a 9-hour estimate. We had never driven the route, but it was an hour faster than the one we took getting there. The first leg, about 3 hours, passed without any incident, no sign of what was ahead for us. The drive was easy, freeways and cruise control. But Maya had to piss, and I could go myself. I pulled up the closest gas station on my phone. It only added 10 minutes to the drive. The sky was red, not quite dusk yet. Just a mile from the exit, I came to regret my choice. The road deteriorated from smooth asphalt to a mess of potholes and pathetic attempts at repairs. Maya gave me a look, making it clear we needed to stop as soon as possible. There were no buildings, and the signs were rusted and shot to hell with buckshot and small caliber rounds. Pine trees and dead deer were the only sights until I rolled up on the gas station. It was thankfully more modern and clean looking than I had feared. It wasn't nice by any means, but I wasn't worried about contracting a disease in the bathroom. I started pumping gas. Might as well fill up while we were here. Maya rushed into the little store. I kept an eye on her until she passed behind an aisle of chips. The pump was glacial. At least we didn't need too much. After I got back, it should be enough to get us home. It felt like she was taking too long. I pulled out my phone, 5:45 p.m. The sun was sinking. And worse, I had no cell service. At this point, I was still more annoyed than worried. I left the pump running and went inside after her. It looked like any other shitty gas station, except it was completely empty. No attendant, no cashier, no janitor, no one. I called out for Maya, loud enough for anyone inside to hear. No response. Annoyance was quickly giving way to fear. I rushed to the women's room and threw the door open. No Maya, just a bathroom that hadn't been cleaned in months. Maya, I was yelling, but there was no response. I look out the windows, the car was there, no sign of Maya. I ran to the men's room this time. I slammed into the door. It doesn't budge. My shoulder still hurts. I bang on the door with my arm that wasn't screaming in pain. Maya, are you in there? I hear a flush. Is she deaf? The door lock clicked. A massive man steps out. Stench poured out with him as he finished adjusting his belt. He was easily 6'5", black hair peeling up at the temples with a big chunk of cheek scarred over. Shut the fuck up. This is a public place, kid. He pushed me aside and walked toward the door. I knew I would never forget that fucking face the second I saw it. I kicked open the bathroom door. My vision constricted, sound fell away. I retched. There was no point checking vitals. I am so small, but I wasn't thinking anymore. I charged out of the store door. I scanned the area, but there was nothing. No cars. No hulking monsters. Just dusk and crickets. I had to drive 5 minutes back to the freeway to get a signal. The police questioned me, and I told them everything I've told you. They seemed skeptical but didn't arrest me. Not yet, at least. I bought a gun today. I'm going back to look for someone with that scar. His face was ugly, but it wasn't the devil's. That was what I saw in that room. Audio transcription. Can you see them? No, of course not. If everyone could see them, news reports would be blasting nonstop. Maybe only the ones they touch can see them. In that case, I'm not sure how much this is going to help. Maybe it's useless. It might be, but I can't give in to apathy just yet. I still have some of my soul swimming around. There are these creatures, monsters, aliens, maybe? Things. There are these things that hunt us. They are invisible at first, until they make contact. I think. God. I don't know for sure, but it's my best guess. The things, they feed on our emotions. I don't mean like IT, where fear makes it stronger. I mean they literally rip your emotions, your ability to feel, out of you. For me, it was a jagged hand that tore through my chest. The pain was excruciating, as if the hand going through me truly was punching a hole through my torso. Except, when it removed its arm, my body was fine. I was not fine. I could feel it. Something inside me was ripped out. Something was missing. I felt hollowed. That's what I'll call them. Hollowers. I saw it standing over me. Its hand held an ethereal orb of constantly shifting color. It stood about 6 feet above me, humanoid but jagged, like it was made of broken glass. Its digits on its fingers and toes were extraordinarily long and sharp. Its skin, I don't know if it even has skin. All I could see was black. Black so dark it consumed the light around it, almost like staring into a black hole. The light it held, my light. I watched as it swallowed my light inside its endless maw. No eyes. No teeth. Just a hole that I watched the colors from my soul be drained down until they were nothing. I ran. It watched as I ran, but it gave no chase. It simply stood there, as if it knew I would never really escape. And it was right. I've seen it so many times since. I can see it coming now, but no matter what I do, it always catches me. It's taken from me each time. Hollowed me more and more. I think I can still feel rage. I know I still feel fear. I am in a constant state of fear, but that is all. That is all that is left of me. Rage and fear. And maybe desperation. I'm sorry to drop all of this on you, Leon, Or at least I wish I was sorry. I know I should feel sorry. That might be the worst part. I know what I should be feeling, but I just can't feel it anymore. I don't feel love. I don't feel happiness. I don't even feel sorrow for the emotions I lost anymore. I see it again, Leon. I see it right now. And I hear it. Oh God. Leon, it's speaking to me. I don't know what will be left of me after this. Please. Help. It's getting louder. I can hardly think anymore, I ugh. End of audio transcription. Those are the last words from my former best friend, Sonny. That was the call he made shortly before he went on a mass-killing spree. My best friend, a man who lived for his dogs and worked as a school guidance counselor, who gardened special plants for endangered butterflies and donated blood plasma on a regular basis, went on to kill 9 people in what police describe as a drug-induced rage. The toxicology reports came up empty, but they had no other explanation how a 5 feet 9 inches and 130-pound man, 175 centimeters and 59 kilo, could kill 9 people while unarmed. For officers tried to restrain him. They tried tasers, pepper spray, targeted strikes. The police had to shoot him. After watching the body cam footage, I don't blame them. He was sick, something awful went wrong in his head, and it had tragic results. That's what I thought at least, but now I know he was telling the truth. It has stolen from me too. It tore my throat open and swallowed whatever was inside. The hollowers. It's not just one. There are so many. I see them stalking people as I drive, as I myself try to outrun my own hollower. I know I'm only buying time, but I need ideas. I'm still kicking, but the news isn't good. It doesn't matter how many miles I put between me and that thing. It always catches up within the day. I abandoned my family, my friends, everything. I ran to the other side of the country, then the other side of the world, and still, I couldn't get a full 24 hours of relief. I can tell it has taken more from me, because I don't miss the life I left anymore. My heart ached being away from my wife and my children. I wept knowing how confused they must be. How worried, scared, sad. Now all I know is what I should feel. Sonny was right. I've lost my ability to feel, but I still remember how I am supposed to feel. Years of social conditioning, I suppose. It's infuriating. I understand why Sonny went mad now. I feel myself slipping. I can't stop to sleep. I can't stop to eat. Anytime I stop, it catches me. It tears into me, and it hollows me out. Even if I survive this, I don't know if I'll still be me. Am I me anymore? How can I return to a family that I can't feel love for? I could try to fake it. I could try to live off the memories of my love for them. Would they know? I might do more harm than good trying. It would be so much effort too. I know I have a duty to them, but how much is reasonable to expect? What if I want to just live alone after this? Is that so wrong? My head is telling me yes, it's awful to think this way, but my heart is silent. All of that is assuming I make it out of this alive. I'm no saint like Sonny. I'm more likely to crack faster than he did. I already have started to hear its whispers. It tells me to strangle the old lady next to me on the plane. It tells me to kill the cab driver and steal his car. It doesn't matter how far I get. I can always hear it whispering. When it is hollowing me, it might be leaving something to fill the void. Something of itself to poison what little of me is left inside. I will not listen. I will not break yet. My goal is to find out all I can about these things and report them here. The more I find, the better a chance we all have. If I can feel anything, I know I can still feel fear and spite. Funny, that's what Sonny was left with too. I wonder if the hollowers have a preferred order of emotions they devour. I wonder if there is a reason to why they target those emotions, or if they just want their victims to suffer as much as possible. I wouldn't put it past them to be so sadistic. Here's what I've found. You can't see them until they have struck you. There are many of them, not exactly a 1-for-1 ratio, but a rough estimate would be maybe 1 for every 100 people. They are more prevalent in certain areas. Cemeteries, hospitals, and veterinary hospitals are big ones. I see more in the city than I do in rural areas, but when I do see them in rural areas, they are tightly packed. I've never seen more than one stalking a single person. They can go through certain matter, seemingly at will. I've seen them walk through walls, phase through speeding traffic, and even walk through other people without attacking them. I haven't found any weapons that work. Guns, baseball bats, tasers, fire, light, water, salt, silver, gold, loud noise, acid, smoke, holy water, crucifix, Star of David, Bible, Book of Mormon. Nothing works. I don't know of any pagan, Norse, Greek, Roman, or Egyptian holy items, so if you have any recommendations, I'll be more than happy to try. I'll try anything at this point. Finally, when it strikes you, you will feel nothing but pain and cold. The pain will overwhelm you at first. It feels just like a mortal wound. The cold comes after. Right where it struck, it will feel as if your body was devoid of all warmth since creation. It will not cease until hours after. The cold comes from the creature. They are absolute zero. Now for my speculations. I think they activate off tragedy. That's why they try to drive their victims to do heinous acts. I've seen them on television. I've seen one of those things recently on reporting of that mass casualty story. I've even gone back and watched reports on past events, and sometimes I've seen them there too. It's not every time. Some people are just genuinely evil, but it's not an insignificant amount either. Tragedy must weaken our defenses or strengthen their powers. The more tragedy they create, the more they get to feed. I also believe they must leave a mark on their victims, something that signifies that this prey is theirs and that keeps others from muscling in on their territory. While testing weapons on one of them, it did acknowledge my existence, but it never tried to retaliate. It stood there and stared at me for a while before returning to stalking its prey. I think they are intelligent. They certainly show signs of intentional behavior. Mine likes to wait until I pass out from exhaustion before striking. Mine likes to taunt me a lot. On the way to the airport, I hit traffic. While stuck, it ran in and out of my vehicle multiple times. It walked into the back seat of my car and sat there staring at me through the rearview mirror. I asked what its name is, but it did not respond. I asked why it hunts me, but it did not respond. I asked what it wanted, but it did not respond. I asked if it is the one that killed Sonny, and it laughed. I don't know how much I have left in me. It has taken from me a few times now. I will do my best to survive, relay what information I can, and beat this thing. If any of you are in the same boat as I am, stay strong. I did it. I killed that dastard, and I feel great. Weeks of torment, of pain, or fear, it's all over. It was so simple. Why didn't I think of it before? I could have saved myself a whole lot of pain. Let me start from the beginning. I know I haven't been the most cohesive throughout this entire experience, but to be fair to myself, I was dada pants, scared out of my mind the entire process. I tried to be brave and analytical, but I was never good at that crap. It feels so good to be me again. I can laugh. I can joke. I can go back to my wife and kids. My beautiful wife and kid. Kid? I can't remember how many I have. I can't remember their names. I'm sure it'll all come back to me after a good nap. I'm sleep deprived and stressed out. I've been through some serious trauma. Let me regale you with my triumph, though. I still haven't forgotten all of you other people getting stalked out there. Okay, let's take it from the top, for real this time. So, when I left off, I was on the other side of the world. I was still trying to run, so I thought that would give me some time, but it turned out to not really help at all. Still, I decided if I was going to suffer, I would rather suffer at home than someplace where it rains snakes and tarantulas, so I booked the flight back. While on the plane, I could see that thing running, following me until we got up above the clouds. It was fast. Ungodly fast. Like, I don't know that the laws of physics can explain how a 12-foot Titan can be that fast, but I guess we're beyond the realm of science, aren't we? On the plane, I tried to figure out what emotions I could still feel. After many movies, I came to the alarming conclusion I was only left with 4: nervous, frightened, shock, and rage. Both nervous and frightened seem like subsets of fear. Shock is a subset of surprise, and rage is of anger. I wasn't sure if the Hollower would take both nervous and fright at the same time. Going off of its previous sadistic tendencies, I guessed it would drag this out as long as possible. When I landed, I got my answer. As I deboarded the plane, it launched itself through my chest. I felt the hole ripping through me as it dove claws first through my body, as if it were a dolphin jumping through a hoop. I collapsed in pain and was rushed to medical. They said they thought I had a minor heart attack and advised me to take it easy. I assured them I would, then quickly went running off. I checked my feelings again. Well, I certainly felt shock as that thing went through me. I certainly felt afraid at the moment. I thought about my family and how nervous I was about them finding me in this state. How nervous I was. I couldn't feel it anymore. I no longer worried about if they had reported me missing and if I would be detained. The rotten parasitic freak. Yep, rage was still all there in building. As I exited the airport, the voices grew louder, but I knew better than to do anything crazy at an airport. That's where they expect it the most. I thought, I'd be better off going to a mall and NO. Stop that. Those aren't your thoughts. Those aren't you. It was getting harder to differentiate that thing's influence and my own thoughts. I rushed off quickly, even though I knew it would be close behind me. Always right behind me. Though my soul felt frozen over, I was desperate for any food other than airplane food. I no longer worried about if my car was being monitored, and so I took it out of the parking lot and drove to the nearest fast food place. I was starving. Is hunger an emotion? Maybe I had 3 emotions left at the time. How twisted would that be? If it had hollowed me out to the point where I couldn't care anymore, then it took my ability to feel hunger and watched as I wasted away. Man, these are some sick puppies, I'm telling you. Anyways, it had just attacked me, so I figured that I had some time. I was so wrong. Right as I was about to get my food, it came through the counter and crushed my head between its claws. The agony was excruciating, and my chest hadn't recovered yet, so I felt like I was just a walking pair of arms and legs. I grasped onto consciousness but couldn't hold on, and everything faded to black. When I woke up, paramedics were about to lift me onto a stretcher. I screamed at them not to touch me, and it stunned them long enough for me to bolt and get into my car. They tried to stop me. They were pulling on the door handle, but I'd already locked it. In hindsight, I do appreciate the above and beyond effort they gave trying to help me. I feel bad now about running 2 of them over. In my defense, all I could think at the time was if they trapped me in a hospital, it would all be over for me. I hope they both are recovering nicely. I also hope I don't end up with criminal charges. I hadn't thought that far until now. Anyways, I gunned it. I didn't know where I was going, I just drove. I kept driving and driving until an idea popped into my head. Dance club. It was brilliant. If I drove my car into a dance club, there would be so many people injured and killed that a tragedy of that size would NO. I had to shut it out again. Dance club wasn't a terrible idea, though. A place filled with joy and fun might be what I need to shake this monster off. That might be why it eats people's joy and love first. It is weak to those feelings, and it needs to get rid of them. So, I drove to the dance club and hid myself in the mess of people. I was wrong again. While I did notice a lack of other Hollowers in the area, I also noticed the voices getting louder. I tried to shut them out, check my feelings. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of that thing. I'm afraid of what I might do. I want to just rip it apart. I want to tear it limb from limb like it has been tearing me. It then dawned on me, I am no longer shocked. I'm not shocked by my actions. I ran over 2 people and didn't bat an eye. I forgot to check myself after the restaurant attack. I'm down to 2 emotions left. I'm at the same breaking point that Sonny was at. In that moment, I realized I needed to escape. I needed to get as far away from people as I could. I ran out the back door, but the Hollower realized what I was doing. He cut me off at the back door and sank his claws through my eyes. In that moment, I no longer felt the panic I had to get away from people. I no longer feared what I would do. The Hollower lifted me off the ground as it spoke venom into my mind. Rip them apart. Tear their entrails from their bodies and string them up on the ceiling. Drown the floor with their blood. Reduce them to gore and splinters. Its deep, distorted voice echoed in my brain, growing louder and louder. I'd never lost my temper before, but at that moment my rage is all I had. I lashed out at the Hollower, and to what should have been my shock, I connected. My fist felt like it was torn down to the bone as it connected with the monster, but all I had was rage. It dropped me, stunned, and I wasted no time attacking its leg. I balled my hands into one large fist and swung as hard as I could at the back of its knee. The blow was successful and brought the beast down. It swung wildly at me, pain clawing through my chest and shattering my legs. The pain only fueled my rage. It desperately tried to redirect me by shouting in my mind, "Kill the dancers, baptize yourself in their blood, and you will be freed." Its words could not sway me. Instead, they drove me over the edge. "I'm not a part of your game." I shouted back at the abomination. I climbed its jagged body up towards its neck, remembering the first strike it landed on me. "Your rage is wasted on me. You will not find peace without blood." I ignored its words. I did not want peace. I did not want anything anymore. I was reduced to a vessel of pure rage. You made me this way. You poured this fuel to my rage. Now watch me use it to break you. I spat my words of spite at it as I went into a frenzy, clawing furiously at the throat of the beast. It screamed. It flailed. It dug its claws into me again and again. Pain tore my body into 2. Pain severed my head. Pain ripped off my limbs, but pain was not physical. I was. My nails tore chunks of black void from the creature and sent it splattering across the pavement. My fist slammed down on its head until ooze leaked from it. Despite the pain making my body feel like it was reduced to atoms, I attacked relentlessly until the Hollower was hollowed. I had carved out most of its neck and ripped apart the final strand, holding its head on its body. I broke open its chest and carved out all the void flesh I could empty. I ripped its arm from its body and sunk its claws into its own eye sockets. I felt great. That brings me to where I am now, in a hotel room surveying my condition before I return to my life. With it dead, my connection to the Hollowers seems to be fading. I can still see them on tape, but I haven't seen one in person since. I don't know for sure what I'm going to do. I think I might tell the police I was kidnapped and drugged. That's kind of what happened, just missing the part that the being responsible is a 12 monster of unknown origin. I feel like myself again. I even got my funny bone back. I didn't know that was an emotion. I hope this helps any of you who are stalked by a Hollower. Fight back. Take them by surprise though. Who knows what would have happened if that thing tried to throw me? Would it just throw my spirit, or would I have gone splat? I can't wait to get home. I bet my family has been worried sick. My only concern is this void gunk / blood / flesh / whatever. It won't come off. In fact, the more I look at myself, the more I find on me. It's almost as if it's growing. I figure it just can't be scrubbed off with normal stuff, but it should eventually fall off, right? I didn't try too hard to get it off either. The hot water here must be broken because it was ice cold no matter what I set the faucets to. I can't stand cold showers. I'm hoping that this stuff will be invisible to my wife considering its origin. Otherwise, it'll be hard to explain why half my body is covered in black ichor. I even have shards of that thing still stuck inside me too. They're getting bigger, so I think they're worming their way out. I wonder how they got so deep, but at least it doesn't hurt. Anyways, that's my saga over. Wish me luck. I hope you don't see me on the news. Every day after first period, I see a hallway I never seen before. January 15th, 2025, Wednesday. Today was weird. I don't know if I imagined it or what, but I have to write it down. I was in first period, AP Language Arts class. Normally after first I leave through a pretty long and bombarded hallway full of stampeding, hormonic teens trying, but not intending, to get to second period. I have gym second period, and my path to gym is down one long hallway. Then I go outside from the end of that hallway. Then I make a right after passing the courtyard. I always look deep into the surrounding hallways, because that always looks so unfamiliar when I pass by them every day. This hallway, however, didn't even have lights. No panels for lights, nothing. There were 2 doors gradually opening on the left side with a creepy-ass thing at the end of it. My heart dears, but I keep walking. No one else acknowledged it. And shit spreads in school like a moth to a flame. Mindlessly surrounds something that has no purpose of being swarmed. Even still, if I see something else, I'll write it. January 16th, 2005, Thursday. I've seen it again. The hallway, that is. But this doesn't make sense. Let me start from the beginning. I was leaving first and my heart racing. I passed by the previous placement of the hallway prepared to see that figure moved or something. But somehow it gets worse. The hallway wasn't there. As my heart returned to a normal BPM, my entire body gets engulfed in a wave of heat as I look up at a massive copy and paste it on the roof perfectly vertical to the roof. As a 6'2" skinny 17-year-old, boy, I saw an entirely different dimension. Too uncanny for my eyes to register, and too demonic to move. People pushed past me as one girl on her phone bumped hard into my back, making my balance fail as I quickly caught myself in a moment of realization that I was in school. She, on the other hand, fell on the floor, dropping her prone in the process. Picking up her phone to help out, but before I could apologize, she snatched her phone from my unexacting grip and darted to the end of the normal hallway, pushing and shoving people out of her way. Never looking back then, before I could look back up. I felt a strong jolt in room. I'm standing in the gym, doing attendance for second period. I don't expect you to believe me, but I can't get over how I don't remember now I got to second period. It almost felt like I woke up from a paralysis dream or something. I'm pretty sure that girl that bumped into me was in my first period, so I'm going to try and talk to her. Maybe we can find out what it is together. I'll try tomorrow. January 17th, 2025, Friday. In this log I'm going to highlight my conversation with the girl and give my opinion the following day, so I can gather my thoughts. Girl, oh hey, come here quick. Me, actually I needed to talk to you too. Did you see it too? Girl, yeah, I can't believe a rat was moving the ceiling tile yesterday. It scared the shit out of me. This school is completely trash for real. Me, yeah, no kidding, I didn't even know what I was looking at. The rest of the conversation was bland. Mostly her describing her unmatched fear of rats, which to credit, she indeed was scared. To be honest, Her rant with rats only slightly distracted me from the rising issue. She didn't see the hallway. Am I going crazy, or is she covering something dark? I don't know, but next week I'll tell her what I saw. January 21st, 2025, Tuesday. She lied, right to my face sh. She left school on the 16th, not returning on the 17th. I don't see how I had a full conversation with a girl that wasn't even there. Her attendance was blank. She even left school the period after she bumped into me, damn it, so how? And why is my own memory of this event gone? All I must prove what I did was the dialogue on this sheet of paper. I'm not insane nor crazy. I will ask the teacher if she knows why she left the school. In my next log will just be the conversation with my teacher. I just hope this will help me in some way. Conversation. Teacher. Yes, you need something? She turns from her computer to talk. Me. Yes, I was wondering if you can inform me on why that girl in the second row left. I was supposed to get her number today, but I guess that's that lie. The teacher's face turns from a light smile to a heart-dropping frown. Teacher. Oh, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but she passed on Friday, 17th. I don't know the cause, but her parents left the country the weekend after. Me. Oh, I don't know what to say. She sees the realization as it smacks my face, and upon realizing, she sits closer and says in a lighter tone, Teacher. It's alright if you need a second. I'll let you step outside. Me. No, it's fine. Just going to take a second to digest. How in the fuck? I'm basically a zombie in the rest of the school day because what do you do, say, or think when the person you talked to on Friday died on Friday? Although in 6th period I got a message. You need something? XXX4255929. What? No, I'm not answering that. January 22nd, 2025, Wednesday. I decoded the number. To be honest, I didn't think anything of it, but then I looked at what the numbers could mean. It spells hallway. No, I'm just going crazy. Now I'm really not answering it. I'm finishing up first. I'll write back when, or if something happens. Update. Now when a hallway is on the roof, I freak out. So when I see a hallway on the floor, what do I do then? Oh, or when you see people walking over a gaping 7x7 hole, or well, hallway, what can you do? You almost try to reason with yourself saying things like, I must be dreaming, or oh, well, it's not real. Well, my response was to simply walk over, and then I fall. I fall. All I could hear was a loud presence of silence and a light heartbeat as I descended closer and closer to that thing, and what, I'm back in 2nd period. The thought of freaking out comes and goes, but something sticks with me like a C4 rigged to explode on my stomach any second. What is it? I'm telling my friend today. I just can't keep this in anymore. January 23rd, 2025, Thursday. I told my friend to read all the papers I wrote, and when he finished, he moved the papers from his face, pale and confused as he began to speak. Friend, oh my God. Me what? Friend, that girl, my dad found her on the roof, dead. He's a custodian, and that's why the parents left so quickly. It was said to be above the 100 hall, where she found and reported the rat, and no one knows why she was up there. I thought suicide, but this makes so much more sense on why not a single camera picked up anything. Me, we're going home. Friend, what, why? Me, I can't go back to 2nd period. And then we left school. I had convinced my parents to take me home, and they agreed. But that doesn't really solve her strange death dosage. Once I got home, I asked my friend if he could get a ride to my house, and he could. Once we were together, I tried to sum up everything that happened to refresh our minds. Then we began to plan. This was the conversation. Me, alright, so I stared to see his creepy hallway. The next day, 16th, a girl bumped into me, and after confronting her on the 17th, she ends up leaving the schools on the 16th, making my conversation on the 17th physically impossible. Continuing to the 21st, I asked the teacher for any information on her, and it stated on her record she was dead, and the cause was unknown. Additionally, you're telling me your dad, which is a custodian, found her dead core in the roof that I saw the hallway? Friend, yeah, pretty much. She apparently was still warm when they found the body. Me, sigh, alright, when was the body found? Friend, to my knowledge, the 17th. Me, nothing makes sense, and I'm starting to really question reality, bro. Friend, before you lose touch with reality, I have a lead. Her phone is still on the roof. They were waiting for the school's permission to do a thorough investigation before investigating the crime scene, since technically the crime scene isn't in the school. They managed to negotiate a secret investigation, and my dad oversees cleaning up. However, here is where it gets interesting. Me, I'm listening. Friend, they don't know where her phone is. Me, wouldn't it be on her? Friend, You would think it would, right? But I had her find and its last known location is still in the roof. If we find it, we might have a clue of who took it. And when you realize that the number that has been sending you messages was hers, we might be able to find the thing sending you that shit. Me, alright, but now how are we getting to the school without being caught trying to sneak in the roof where a girl died? Friend, well, since my dad is a custodian, he has access to the school overnight, and when he is doing his rounds, we can easily get on the roof and find it before he finds us. Me, I mean, it's really risky, but I have no better plan, so let's do it. After that, we get gloves, flashlights, and our phones are fully charged in case an emergency, and we set off to find her phone. January 23rd, 2025, 11 p.m. Standing inches away from a fellow classmate's grave feels so wrong, but wanting her to be able to rest easy knowing that what killed her will be found, I get a newfound determination, which got instantly shattered the moment I feel something weighing on the ceiling tile I try sliding out to climb in the roof. Me, whispering, "What the fuck, D, did they move the body?" Friend, covering his nose W shirt, I was hoping gagging lightly? Alarmingly loud for a whisper. Holy, that shit stinks. Me, guess they didn't. We had a feeling they'd had not moved the body. So in preparation for a situation such as this, we packed nose pinchers, so we can properly crawl in case it stinks. We moved to a tile further away from the body, before I slid the tile from the roof, and boosted my friend up, and I very skillfully and softly pulled myself up before witnessing the inevitable. Her dead, cold, pale, lifeless core. Her eyes were wide open, small cuts in her pupils, her head making a full 360 turn before being precisely placed to stare in the dark abyss above. Hands and fingers in impossible positions, her hair looked pulled out and torn. Mouth was a gaping bloody pool filled with nothing but a dark and miserable red. I threw up. Nothing about her even resembled a human. The only reason why I know is because of the past knowledge of her existence. Otherwise I'd probably guess it was a really elaborate art painting with a distorted mannequin as its base. Those thoughts made my head spin. I always thought the people in movies and books gain a special power to persevere when times get tough. But now I know why they truly move on from death, because they have a movie to finish, they need to publish the book, and I need to finish finding her phone. After around 30 minutes of gauging and crying, we brought throw-up bags just in case, but never thought we would use them. My friend gained the courage to pick back up his phone, go on Find My, and he shared a look of disgust as I did, but with a bit more determination behind his eyes than before we say the body, as we descend into the darkness tracking her phone. January 23rd, 2025, 11:45 p.m. We crawled for about 15 minutes before finally being above the phone's last location, but luckily we didn't find it, but right as we were about to turn around, I got a message from the number. Hello! And upon reading it my instincts darted my eyes to the surrounding darkness, ready for the absolute worst, nothing. 10 minutes go by and not a single sound, presence nothing. Until we get back to the body or where it was. Me, fuck this. Within the next second, from the dark horizon in front of us something comes sliding till it meets the spotlight that my poor phone flashlight managed to light. Sparkles and charms glistened on the case, with one corner drenched in blood. Her phone, completely shattered, just like our hope, when we look ahead to see a pair of pure white eyes miles in the distance. So small they could be mistaken for marbles, except for the millimeter-sized pupil violently shaking in the border of the white that defines its eyes. I got a message. Are you scared? I hear my friend scream as I look up to see a shadowy figure with the whitest eyes, pupil now locked onto me but somehow still moving, like its eyes were too wide so it was straining to keep them open. Has no nose but still breathing, has no body but I can hear its heartbeat. I'm stuck staring into its eye. Wow. I hear my friend crying next to me, feel him crying. But he can't move either. 20 minutes go by, 30, 50 an hour, maybe more. I moved. And as soon as I moved, my body refroze as the thing started to laugh a rumble of sheer evil, as I came to realize it's amused at the fact that we are scared. Amused at the fact that my friend peed himself in sheer hopelessness. Amused at our sheer terror. Immediately after this realization, an unhealthy amount of adrenaline rushed through my hands as I grabbed my friend and started banging the shallow roofing below, trying to get out. I'm responsible for bringing him here. I at least want him to make it back home. As he realizes what I was trying to do, he does the same, and the thing, watching us the whole time as we struggle to escape, now laughing even harder than before. Then the roof gives way, and we fall and fall and fall. I wish I hit the ground, ending it there, but I ended up back in second period. January 24th, 2025, Friday. I texted my friend, and we agreed to meet up later today. This will be a long discussion about that experience. Here it is. Me, it got us, it played us. How did it outsmart us by leading us to the phone, using the SIM card in it to text us, even though you would think since she died her service would be cancelled, and sit there and mentally torture us like that? We're already its food. By giving it fear and curiosity, it grows and learns, and all the meanwhile, has genuine fun toying with us. Friend, it's learning, so then what? Me, I don't know. Friend, if what you said was accurate, then how do we beat something that not only feeds from us just by trying to figure out its existence, but also just genuinely loves toying with us? It's more than powerful enough to just kill us, so doing anything is a waste of time. Caring is a waste of time. We're fighting a losing battle. Me, this is just a prediction, not fact, and to disprove your theory, everything has an end. This one is just a bit more difficult to reach. And what should we name it? 'Cause now we know its existence is going to stick with us for a while. Might as well. Friend, what about despair? It's all I feel when I think about ways to defeat it. Me, sure, let's go with despair for now, but later I might think of a more elaborate name. Friend, anyway, what do we do since it has an end? Me, I don't know. Let's just ignore it for now. Friend, ignore it? Easier said than done. Me, yeah, but I mean we truly don't know enough about it to do really anything else. Friend, yeah, but I am scared, and being scared knowing that's pleasuring to despair, I'm even more scared. Me too, but don't show it outside this or your house, or it will not stop till it's fed. To be honest, we had lost hope. Despair is just too much for us. I sat up all night thinking, hoping, praying that something, any solution would slap me in the face, and all is better. But if my life was that easy, I wouldn't be writing this. If I didn't have a true story to tell, I'd be a normal writer, telling a normal story with a normal happy or sad ending. But this is true despair. Tomorrow is another day. January 25th, 2025, Saturday. My friend and I were supposed to meet up at his place to watch each other's backs, because we always feared being alone on the weekends. I don't know, we felt like we could be picked off one by one if we stayed alone. Anyway, he had caught the flu, so instead of going to his place we FaceTimed so he could get some rest. Once he called me, he set up his phone so I could visibly see him along with the window behind him. We're paranoid, and he went fast to sleep. I set my phone to the right of my monitor on my desk, so I could play the game and occasionally check up on him in case something happened. Nothing ever did before, but today I fully understood everything. My eyes glance at the phone as I hear my friend sneeze. What I saw, however, was a pure red figure, bony, curled up laying on top of my friend, hands and legs intertwined as its hands rubbing his forehead rapidly. Its eyes were the size of a penny, but only one was in its sockets. Its focus was on my friend, but it never looked away from the camera. My friend turns, due to uncomfortability, and upon doing so he lets out a big series of coughs. However, the root of these actions was caused by the now elongating demon that grows to cause discomfort and keeps a steady supply of mucus pumping into him, using a very large and fleshy tube attached to its stomach, jamming it down his esophagus, and almost as it derives pleasure from this, starts salivating on his sheets, but never losing eye contact with me. It showed me the truth, showing me the root problem, showing me the answer that hurts to accept more than it's worth. Demons have been roaming the earth ever since the earth was created, but I can see through their deception. Somehow, I can see the demon known as the flu. This changes everything. Like I said, I wouldn't have wanted to post this if I didn't like how it ended, but that's okay, 'cause it's only just beginning. Sarah had never believed in ghosts. Growing up in a small town, she had heard all the urban legends, the haunted house at the end of the street, the shadow figures in the woods, but they were just stories. That's why, when she found the old Victorian house listed for cheap, she didn't think twice about moving in. The first night was quiet, too quiet. No creaky floors, no distant howling wind, just silence. That should have comforted her, but instead it felt wrong. Then came the whispers. At first, she thought it was just the wind sneaking through the cracks in the walls. But the words were clear, deliberate. "Sarah, come downstairs." Her heart pounded. She tried to ignore it, reasoning with herself. Lack of sleep. Stress. The power of suggestion. But the whispers didn't stop. They became more insistent, more desperate. "Sarah, I need you." One night, she woke up to a shadow at the foot of her bed. It stood still, taller than any person should be, its form shifting like black smoke. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then it whispered, right against her ear. "He let me in." Sarah bolted upright. The figure was gone, but the whisper lingered in her mind. She didn't know who he was, and she didn't want to find out. She tried to leave the house the next morning, but the front door wouldn't budge. Neither would the windows. Her phone had no signal. It was as if the house itself had sealed her inside. That night, the whispers grew louder, turning into shrieks. They clawed at her mind, filling her head with visions, faces twisted in agony, blackened hands reaching for her. Then she saw him. A tall, emaciated figure stood in the doorway of her bedroom. Its face was stretched into a grotesque grin, teeth too sharp, eyes too hollow. "He let me in, now it's your turn." The next morning, Sarah was gone. The house sat silent once more, waiting for its next guest. And somewhere in the darkness, the whispering man smiled.